missing.
I'm on the correct stream.
Please work. Oh my god, I think it's working. Okay.
I'm not seeing anything yet.
I just started for me. Is it working?
There we go.
Can you guys hear us?
I'm gonna turn it off. Oh, 6 whole oils.
Look guys, I'm sorry. I'm using Streamlabs instead of OBS and I had to figure it out. How do I get to my stream settings? Editor? Is that it? Oh, there it is. Now I can look at the levels and stuff.
Evu and Beerba. Oh, these comments.
How are the levels, guys? Everything good?
From what I heard, it sounded good.
Okay, I turned you up a little bit.
Hearing that echo, so
got
being challenged. Mock.
Sounds good. Volume levels. Okay, that's good. I have ultra low latency as well, so keep up with the chat. Okay.
They said sounds good.
I accidentally started a separate stream at first because I don't know how to work Streamlabs. Okay, so anyway, we can probably get to the video so you can see the watch together thingy. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Alright, so hello friends, welcome to a live stream. Again, I haven't live streamed in a very long time. Again, I'm joined by my friend, Matt Madore, who's very super smart when it comes to nutrition, and of course, I'd like to thank him a lot for setting aside the time to, like, go through this video and collect all of, you know, the science stuff so that we can respond to it. I did reach out to Hench Herbivore and ask if he'd be interested in discussing this live, coming on the channel and talking about it. Never got a response. If you'd like to see the screenshot of the Instagram message, it's in the description. And we're just going to be going through his video called Vegan Killer, 15 Reasons Not to Eat Oil Ever. And at the end, there will be a Q&A, and you can join the Discord for that. It's linked in the description. So if you disagree with something or something didn't make sense or you just had general questions about the video, you can hop in there and talk about it. So yeah, was there anything you wanted to say before we get started?
Right, yeah, I just kind of wanted to preface with like, I like Hench. Like he has some hilarious content, and I've watched his videos in the past, and I've been in his position before. I used to like vehemently oppose oils and like argue for their health detriments, but it came clear to me that in like quite a few interactions I had pushback, and I'm like, so looking back at this, I'm like so glad that I had pushback from people that just responded, and I like knew I didn't have an answer and I was wrong. And like it like I kind of at the time just like built up this like rage at them. And like slowly I began to like realize that I was actually like thankful for the fact that they did that, and it like helped me be more actually critical instead of just follow along with what I had believed and ignoring opposing opinions. So yeah, like I said, like I like Hench, I like a lot of his content. I just really think he's way off the mark here, and I don't think this is helpful to this movement, and definitely want to address these sort of things because I think it over complicates things more than they need to be.
Yep. Alright, and of course if Hench did decide that he wanted to like talk about this live, I'm sure, you know, I'd be willing to host, and I'm sure if you had the time, you'd probably be willing to talk to him. But yeah, that offer's still open. Hench is always welcome to come on and talk about his claims about oil if he wants. And I guess we could just get started. Oh, one more thing. So all the references that Matt will be citing are in the Discord as well, under the channel category for this event, in the links or sources reference channel, whatever it's called. So yeah, let's get started then.
It's vegan personal trainer and nutritionist Paul from Hench Herbivore with 15 reasons why you should avoid eating oil. While we need
There we
some
go.
dietary fats in order to absorb the fat-soluble nutrients such as the carotenoids and vitamins E, D and K, this does not need to come in the form of oil, which is simply liquid fat that's been extracted from a whole food. From my perspective, oil is the least healthy thing that a vegan can have in their diet. And here's why. 1. Increased heart disease risk. Oil raises LDL, or bad cholesterol, in our blood. While there are 9 compounding factors which can make heart disease risk worse, this is the only critical risk factor. Coconut oil is actually worse than beef for this, though not quite as bad as butter. Even olive oil contains 7.5 to 20% palmitic acid, a saturated fat that is one of the worst offenders for elevating serum LDL. Some people claim that olive oil is heart healthy, and although it's healthier than what it displaces, butter, it is still causing damage. Coronary artery disease is the #1 cause of death in humans. A vegan diet can potentially prevent and even reverse this disease, yet currently it is still the biggest killer, even among vegans. Surely a little oil is okay though, right? In the words of Cordwell Esselstyn, who is clinically proven in peer-reviewed medical journals to have reversed heart disease in the vast majority of his patients,
no oil. No oil. Let's just take a moment here because some people still are not clear about the fact, no oil.
here is a chart for heart disease risk. All sources are linked below this video. The average omnivorous eater has an LDL of 110, which puts them at high risk. For a vegetarian, it's 106, slightly better, but still high. The average vegan with oil in their diet comes in at around 90, which is medium risk. But what can a whole foods vegan expect?
Do you want to pause there?
Okay, there's already a lot to unpack.
Let me pull
I
up your
don't
document too.
like he starts out with like he's laying good groundwork on like the LDL cholesterol relationship with cardiovascular disease basically being the critical factor. It's the risk maker. And then he points to coconut oil, and I would agree with him. Like coconut oil is very high in saturated fat, and I would suggest for that reason that you limit coconut oil consumption. And it has obviously been demonstrated to increase LDL in randomized controlled trials. And he mentioned it's not as bad as butter, but kind of slightly less. So would be watching that if you're concerned with cardiovascular disease risk. In addition to that, palm oil can be a bit high in saturated fat, but it does have quite a bit more monounsaturated fat. So like palm oil ends up, I believe, a little less than coconut oil. So we're moving down the spectrum. But aside from those two, like monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat rich oils like sunflower seed oil, olive oil, what else? Canola oil, safflower seed oil, are very, very low in saturated fat. And he mentions olive oil being 5 to 20%. And like even if we assume the worst case 20%, it's not a lot, like at all. And like if we look at the experiments that suss out, okay, these saturated fats when displacing carbohydrate or polyunsaturated fat or monounsaturated fat increase LDL cholesterol, it's in like increments of like 3, 4, 5% of your total energy intake, which that amount in olive oil, 5 to 20%, would be nowhere even close. So like you could probably not even notice a significant difference in your LDL at all if you added like even a appreciable amount of olive oil. And that's obviously been shown in randomized control trials. You replace things with olive oil and you see substantial decreases in your LDL. The other thing, him mentioning Esselstyn's work and showing the clip. It's just like I kind of laugh at the clip. Like, imagine if that was your like standard of evidence is it like one person saying no oil. But we could go on for like 30 minutes on just the heart disease reversal claim, but like plenty of people have gone over that in depth. I know Avi did like 4 or 5 videos on it, and another person, Anna Borek, is also like skeptical doctor on Twitter, did a video recently on it, also going through the same issues, and I think she even referred to Avi's video. But like the results are the way the trial was designed and the actual clinical definition of heart disease reversal is not at all satisfied by Esselstyn's results. And on top of that, Esselstyn put people on statins. He openly admitted he put people on statins when he couldn't get their LDL down. So, like, already that completely eliminates the fact that it was just a whole foods plant-based diet. So it's bizarre to even claim to begin with. But I agree that a whole foods plant-based diet is absolutely fantastic for heart disease risk, but there's no reason that you need to exclude oil. And his trial doesn't provide evidence to sufficiently make that claim, and it's that's
Mhm.
just where it stands.
Mhm. So he said that it
Um,
reverses heart disease, right?
right. We can
Alright.
say it's really good for prevention, but by the clinical definition of disease reversal, it does not achieve it. And on top of that, like I said, he literally gave patients statins, so it wasn't only diet.
Mm.
And then he also only picked out the adherent people, which in any randomized controlled trial, you would not do that. You would take the whole sample, whether they adhered or not, and you would look at the results. And that's why he'll like try to compare to other similar trials, which don't do that, which is a totally not apples to apples comparison, not fair. And like be like, oh look, mine's way better, and
Mhm.
it's just bizarre.
And when you say it's good for preventing it, you mean like a healthy whole foods plant-based diet that's balanced, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. And
Um,
it's not the absence of oil that we can
right. It's
attribute
just
these health successes to, yeah.
a lower saturated fat, a higher polyunsaturated fat, higher monounsaturated fat, whole unrefined carbohydrates, right? Just
Mhm. And you mentioned that under the clinical definition of reversal, it doesn't achieve this. Do you happen
mhm.
to are you able to like recall what that clinical definition is?
Yeah, I believe I can't remember if it's 10% change in like the minimal lumen diameter of a blood vessel, but
Mhm.
he doesn't reach it. I don't know. That's just me talking offhand. I think that's what it is. I would, if someone's actually like really interested in that, I would definitely watch either Avi's videos or Anaboric, which is skeptical doctors' videos,
Mhm.
um, who cover that in depth, and they both went through that.
Mhm. And do you know what results I don't know if you know this, it's fine if you want, but do you happen to know what results he was achieving that led him to claim he was able to reverse heart disease?
Yeah, right. It was just a really, really low event rate. Like that was it. Like the patients weren't having uh, cardiovascular disease events, but like
And what does it mean
we would
to have a CVD
we
event?
yeah, like you have a heart attack
Oh,
or
okay.
you have like symptomatic like angina, chest pain. Like there's it depends on what your classification is. Like
Mhm.
some include other outcomes, but mainly, I mean, in his case, he's predominantly interested in a myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack,
Mhm.
um, or like some people choose to, some people don't choose to include like revascularization. Um, so like you have blockage and they divert your blood flow so that it goes through a different vessel, but that's yeah, like those everyone in the other 2 videos would go into those in much more depth, and I kind of don't want to like that could go on forever.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay, I guess just to like summarize this and make sure everything's clear, he was claiming that he was able to reverse heart disease because his patients had fewer instances of heart attacks, but that totally
Okay.
deviates from like the clinical definition of reversal.
Right. No, so it was that, and then he did in some patients measure the change in minimal lumen diameter, but like I said, it didn't reach the clinical definition for cutoff. Like that was the
Mm-hmm.
problem, or for reversal cutoff. What am I saying? But and then on top of that, he had like a few like hand-picked angiograms where it looks like blood vessels dilated again when before they were diseased, and you could see where blockages were, and it's like, okay, that's not helpful either.
Mm-hmm.
We don't go by anecdotal pictures of things, and especially if it's the case that he was using statins in these patients. Like, we don't even know if it was someone who was using a statin, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, okay.
Mm-hmm. And statins are like the medication, right, that they give to people with CVD?
Right, they are lipid lowering medications. They'll
Mm-hmm.
lower, like, predominantly they lower LDL, and the goal is ultimately to lower the concentrations of lipoproteins that have ApoB, which is basically the protein that wraps around the lipoprotein. It comprises the protein of the lipoprotein, and that's what makes them potentially atherogenic, which means they can cause cardiovascular disease and build up plaque. Those proteins can interact inside the vessel wall in a way that makes them bind and then like trigger cascade of inflammation and oxidative stress and then plaque formation. And ultimately you want to lower the concentration of lipoproteins with that specific protein because that lowers your risk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And are we good to continue with the video then?
Yep.
Okay.
Expect. Here's former YouTuber, vegan for the win. His LDL after 1 year of a junk food vegan diet was 93, which is the high end of medium risk. And after eating whole foods, plant-based for
That's funny because like a junk food we'd assume includes quite a bit of the saturated fat rich oils, and it's still he's like far and above in most people, even with that considered. Like 93 is not bad at all. Obviously the lower the better, but we'll continue on, see where he goes with this.
for 2.5 years.
My LDL, the lowest my doctor's ever seen anybody, is 38.
Categorically, he is heart attack proof.
So
The
if we want to pause this, if we're going to go by anecdotes, my LDL before I was even vegan was 43. So, and I was consuming plenty of olive oil, like plenty of other oils. Like I don't, so debunked. If that's what your standard is, Hench.
My LDL last time I got tested was like 56, and I was still eating junk food then, so there's another anecdote.
Okay, so we can let him continue.
#1 killer of human beings, stopped in its tracks and even reversed by avoiding animal products and oils.
Okay, so you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that doesn't establish that it's due to avoiding animal products and oils, because if he abandoned his junk food diet in favor of like whole foods, plant-based, presumably he's also not eating like saturated fat either, right?
Right. Yeah. Right. Like that's the whole thing. It's like these people are pulling the most important levers for disease prevention, which is they're reducing their saturated fat intake, they're increasing their polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fat in place of that, and they're increasing intake of fiber from whole grains, from other unrefined carbohydrates, which all themselves are like nothing here is making the distinction that it's the removal of oil at all.
Yeah.
Like it's just not happening.
I feel like this is just an instance of like someone implying correlation equals causation, because like when his LDL was lowered, that correlated with him happening to eat more whole foods, plant-based, so he assumed that's what was causing it, when in reality it had to do with what, you know, like we said before, just decreased rates of saturated or decreased consumption of saturated fat.
Yeah, right. If he was consuming and I'll give Hench credit, like making the point about like coconut oil and like even palm oil, higher saturated fat oils. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
those could increase your LDL significantly, but like it's weird to focus on those two when those are the two that are not predominantly recommended.
Yeah, they're
And
uniquely bad in their saturated
yeah,
fat content,
and
right? They
they're
don't
yeah,
represent oils.
exactly.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah.
Okay.
2. Most oils damage endothelial function, paralyzing arteries so that they cannot dilate properly. Not good, especially if you already have heart disease present. 3.
Okay,
Did
you
you
want
want
to
to
pause it?
respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah, right. So this whole endothelial dysfunction um, is based on a measure of like blood vessel dilation, basically flow mediated dilation, and they all use the same single study to make this claim, and it's using olive oil. And it's not only is it using olive oil, it's using like 50 grams of olive oil, which is like a quarter cup,
Oh, I remember you telling me
with
about this study. They drink like a
with
quarter cup
just
of like,
bread. They
yeah.
gave them a quarter cup of freaking olive oil with bread, and they saw a significant change in flow media dilation, which will start off that like an acute change in flow media dilation after a meal, like who cares? If it's not validated as a risk marker following an acute change and it's actual like chronic like sustained reduced function that matters, then like if it's just acute, who cares? Because we can actually point to things like sleep and exercise acutely decrease flow media dilation. Now, do you really want to tell me that sleep and exercise increase the risk of cardiovascular disease?
Hmm.
Okay,
So,
good luck with that.
so the claim here is that, after consuming this, there was a small change in flow. What flow mediated dilation? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, right. It's
Mm-hmm.
basically like blood vessel responsiveness to blood flow. The blood
Mm-hmm.
vessel dilates as blood flow. But and it's used typically as a marker of endothelial cell function, which are the cells that line the blood vessels and they're responsible for dilation and constriction when needed. Um, on top of that, like, man, they cite this study and like not only do they not disclose the fact that it's slamming people with like a quarter cup of oil, and just bread. They don't disclose that in the other interventions. They did instead olive oil with salad or olive oil with I can't remember what the last meal was, but the other two meals did not show a significant decrease in endothelial dysfunction, and the meal with canola oil did not show a significant decrease or flow media dilation. Excuse me, I said endothelial dysfunction, which I guess it's a proxy for, but um, so it's like the like convenient ignorance of evidence and the like I haven't even gotten to the part that like okay these mechanistic things like does it translate to cardiovascular disease outcomes? No, and we'll see. I'll probably bring it up again, so I won't expand on that too much now. But
Mm-hmm. So just to make sure, so in this study, when they consumed this olive oil with the bread, there was a slight decrease in flow-mediated dilation, and typically something like that is a marker for like compromised endothelial function. But in this particular study, it was just like a small, pretty insignificant decrease. Is that
right,
what's?
they were just literally looking at postprandial, which means after a meal.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they looked at. Like they didn't look at if it stayed like that or if it was just a brief postprandial decrease.
Mm-hmm. And
And
didn't you draw the analogy one time of like if you eat fruit or something, like your glucose levels will go up with
right,
that? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that like fruit is bad because it doesn't keep your glucose levels up. It just goes up right after you eat, but
Right.
it doesn't.
Right.
I think the word is persist, right? It doesn't persist. It doesn't continue. So it's not a cause for
Ex
concern.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
this is literally like, okay, we know that like persistent endothelial dysfunction, if we want to like measure it by FMD, lower FMD. And I actually linked a study that shows that if you have a lower consistent FMD, then you're at an increased risk of cardiovascular disease.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and same goes for glucose. If you have like consistently elevated glucose, you're at an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. You're probably diabetic. Um, but that doesn't mean that if you consume a meal that contains carbohydrate and you get a glucose excursion postprandially, that that's harmful. Like, okay, then we just throw away any food that has any glucose excursion if that's like our cutoff
Mm-hmm.
for harm.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And of course, in addition
and
to this, the amount of oil they were consuming is like totally not representative of the amount of oil
yeah,
people
it's
typically
just
consume.
bizarre. Like,
Yeah.
and when we do look at research that actually takes dietary patterns or olive oil interventions alone, and then looks at sustained flow-mediated dilation or flow-mediated dilation in a period that's not affected postprandially, it improves. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's just such a like myopic, like cherry pick to try to support something that doesn't actually parse out in the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Also, Mock says that you reversed your severe ligma with 1 liter of peanut oil heated to the smoking point every day. I'd just
Oh
like to
my God.
congratulate you on that. That's quite the accomplishment.
I smoked oil. Okay.
Okay, we can continue. Unless there was anything else you wanted to say.
That's probably it.
Okay.
You can keep going.
Okay.
The same thing occurs in the intestinal tract, this time affecting the epithelium. This is why it can feel like we're carrying.
Was there something you wanted to say? I heard that.
Yeah, this is weird. Like, we know that like huge doses of fat, because of the way they're digested and absorbed, might have a detrimental effect on the intestinal cells, because like they're incorporated into lacteals, and then lacteals have to like break a membrane inside the intestinal cells, and then they get incorporated into lymph, and then the lymph goes into the blood, and blah blah blah, and that's how fat gets incorporated, digested, and absorbed. But like this is talking like extremely high fat diets, and on top of that, like intestinal cells are subject to basically abuse anytime you eat food, like to assimilate and incorporate nutrients into the cells and into your bloodstream. It's a lot of work, and it damages intestinal cells, and because of that, they're basically sloughed off, which means like they're kind of like spliced off at the top, like every, I want to say it's 3 to 4 days, and you have like a layer that's renewed, and it's like growing up along. It's kind of like a like, I don't know how to put it, like a tentacle. Like if you go back in the video, can you like go back a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
I'll like kind of try to explain.
Oh wait,
He
how
oh
far
no,
back did that
whoa.
go?
He put up a picture of the intestinal epithelium right
That's
there. Yeah, so you'll see like it's this long filament sort of thing,
mm-hmm.
and like along the sides are like the individual epithelial cells, running up the side of the thing, and then there's some at the top, and the top are the ones that
You mean here?
basically
Here at
interact
the top?
with nutrients.
Oh, I don't know if you can. Sorry,
I was
you
gonna
probably
say I
can't
can't
my
see your
cursor.
mouse. But yeah, at the top, like those are the ones that interact and assimilate the nutrients, and like, and then those get sloughed off, and the cells that are coming along the sides basically migrate up, and those cells are new and they're replenished, and you can absorb nutrients with them and whatnot. So like any food and any nutrient assimilation that happens in the gut is taxing on the gut. So I don't know why this is really a point. Um,
Oh,
that
so
matters that much.
so he's saying that when you consume high amounts of oil, like all this stuff happens in the gut, and that's bad. But first of all, that's like high amounts of oil, again, not representing what like the context people actually consume it in. And second of all, this just happens like anytime you eat. Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, not like the exact same thing that I described when you like feed a super, super high diet or high fat diet doesn't happen every time, but
Oh,
like
okay.
you're taxing the gut every time. And
Mm-hmm.
like I said, for that reason, they get renewed basically. They're like one of the fastest renewing cells in your body just because they take so much and they need to be functioning at the best capacity possible.
Okay. So it's like even though like the high fat diet is doing this, it's like the cells are like continually renewing, so it's not as bad as he's making it out to be.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't even like have to be a high fat diet. Like like I mean, when I say high fat diet, like I mean like insane high fat diets, and like they are usually fed to rodent models to disclose this sort of harm to it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's just so far removed from what
Mm-hmm.
people are actually doing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Was there anything else you want to mention, or are we good to go?
I don't think so. Let's see what he finishes up with. Maybe there's another point.
Okay.
Occurs in the intestinal tract, this time affecting the epithelium. This is why it can feel like we're carrying a brick around inside our guts after an oily meal and can lead to quite a degree of pain for many. 4. Oils
Do you want
activate
to pause for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, fat might actually slow gastric emptying. Yes, it does. That's why you feel full. And that's a good thing. Like feeling fuller.
Mm-hmm.
It basically slows the emptying of the contents of your stomach into the intestine. That's kind of why you don't necessarily like over exaggerates like, oh, you feel sluggish, but like that's why you can feel more full
Mm-hmm.
or feel like you have like, oh, there's something in my gut or whatever he's trying to say there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
You good?
Yep.
Okay.
and can lead to quite a degree of pain for many. 4. Oils activate coagulation factors such as coagulation factor 7 in the blood.
Is there anything you want to say there?
This one is so good. This is another case where I don't know if he'd read the study or like understands the implications. It's another like, oh, like glucose excursions are bad, like
Mm-hmm.
within the normal range. Because if you look at the study that he cites, let's see. I
In the
linked
doc.
arteries can't dilate. Yeah, we
Coagulation
already talked about
factor
that.
7 in oils, is that it?
Right. Activate coagulation factors equals thrombosis equals, oh, you spelled thrombosis wrong. Equals blood clot. So yeah, he cites one study and
It's this one
there
in
is,
the. Sorry, just make sure I'm looking at the right one. Are you looking at the stream to make sure I'm looking at the study he cited?
I'm not actually looking at the stream.
Oh,
Hold on.
that's fine. It's like the.
Let's go to live. Whoops. So let me see. Yes, that one.
Okay.
Uh, so if you scroll down a little bit.
You want me to share my screen? Would that be easier?
No, I can see it. I'm watching the stream.
Just because it's not in real time, so
Yeah,
there's.
it's the 5, 6, 7, 8. I can't remember if it was 8. I think he said 8 or 7. But there's a table. If you want to scroll down, there's a table.
Hmm?
Maybe it's just lagging for me. I don't know.
I
You're
don't see it
scrolling.
updating on the stream. Oh, there it goes. It might be easier to share because of the. Oh, I see. Is it the selected abbreviations and? Oh wait, no, that's not that. Oh, but it's figure 1.
Okay, no, there's that. Keep going. There's a table.
Okay,
Well, you can kind of see
I'm just gonna share my screen. You can look at that.
Okay.
I feel like that would be easier because it's real time.
Yeah. Here, let me pop it open. Right. So yeah, scroll down a little bit.
Mhm.
Keep going. Okay. Nope, not that one. Keep going. Postprandial peak. Yeah, right there. That table.
Let me see if there's an option to open it. Ah! Zoomed out.
Yeah, these I hate the way the tables show up on this freaking site
There we
when
go.
you're on the paper.
Oh.
Okay, yeah, so there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, A. I want to say it's A. So sunflower, olive, rapeseed, palm oil, butter, and then scroll down a little bit. Yeah, low-fat meals. So you'll see, basically the gist of it is that the one on the right, the factor 5, 6, 7A, I want to say it is. 5, 6, 7. Can you scroll up a little bit? Yeah, so 5, 6, 7A. In the meals where they gave either rapeseed oil, which is canola oil, olive oil, sunflower oil, palm oil, butter, versus the low fat, it's a little bit higher, and it's because the values vary so little. All those differences are significant compared to the low fat meal. But the problem is, like I mentioned earlier, this is the same issue as with glucose. This is like saying, oh, when glucose is elevated, it's bad. Therefore, any change in glucose following a meal is bad. Like whether or not it's within the normal range, whether or not it goes back down. And I was glad to have Nick actually found a paper who he's featured in the thumbnail of this video. He actually found a paper that gave the reference range for factor 7A, and all of those values are well within the range. The range goes from 30 to 110 U for liter, which is, you can see all those values like are well within 110. So it's the same thing. It's like your glucose goes up a little bit when you consume carbohydrate. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. It's a normal response. And like this is what like almost everything he says with sort of a mechanistic basis is going to come down to. It's like, well, does that translate to an outcome? And if it doesn't, who cares?
Right. So just to reiterate for people, again, like we brought up the analogy before of like, oh, eating fruit elevates your glucose levels right after you eat it, and elevated glucose levels are bad, therefore fruit is bad. But like a statement like that would neglect to consider the fact that like elevated glucose levels would only be wrong if it was like continual, whereas if you eat fruit, it only temporarily spikes it right after you eat it, but it doesn't stay that way. And it's the same thing for this here. Sure, the levels might be spiked a little bit after you eat, but they're not going to stay that way. And even when you look at the spiked levels, they're still within the healthy range anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Also, someone in chat said, I don't think oil is good for you. It's so concentrated. I would suggest watching the stream, but also you can join the Q&A after this.
I was gonna say, no, we'll actually, I think we'll get to a point that hits on, I saw them make a comment earlier, and we'll get to a point that hits on it, and I'll talk about it.
Yeah, and she can come in the Q&A after, and she could raise her concerns, and we could talk about them then as well, if she's around. If not, that's fine. People have things to do. That's okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say in reference to that?
Nope, that's just, I think he just mentions the coagulation factor, and I think we covered that, so we want to go to the next one.
Thank you, Star. They're my Star mod. I just thought of that one. It's really good. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll play the video.
This can lead to thrombosis, i.e. a blood clot. This is a good thing if it's formed to protect a cut, but can be fatal for those with heart disease.
Right. That's why there's normal range.
Yeah, like in like
because it serves important functions in the body.
And we just looked at the study that he looked at, and the ranges or the means weren't anything that indicated you should be concerned, because again, they were within healthy ranges. It doesn't say that. It doesn't stay that way anyway. So, but yeah, we can continue.
Oh man, the next one coming up is so good. I'm excited.
99% of heart attacks and is behind most strokes too. 5. Lipemia, or fatty blood.
Sorry, I just want to. He talked about it's like behind like heart attack, strokes. Presumably, that would only be when your levels are consistently elevated and when they're elevated above the healthy range, right? Which doesn't happen, right? According to his own study. So.
Yeah, right. If you have thrombosis factors consistently elevated, you're going to have coagulation that you don't want, and it's probably going to lead to adverse outcomes, but that's not what was happening.
Okay. Scooch back a little bit. Let me? Yeah. Okay.
2. 5. Lipemia, or fatty blood. After eating a fatty meal, blood becomes lactescent, a fancy word for milky. The peak of lactescence is when angina attacks usually occur. Angina is the chest pain caused in people with coronary artery disease. It is a direct result of the heart not getting enough oxygen-rich blood. Because of this, I speculate that a high-fat diet must impede athletic performance, though currently I know of no studies with which to back this up.
That line's so good. I don't know any evidence. So, actually, you want to play it for like a second, see if he's finished? I don't know if he adds anything to that.
6.
Okay, yeah, pause it. This is so good. So, go back to the document.
The one we were just looking at?
No, the
this one
Google Doc with all the links. I actually included pictures in here, so you don't even have to open it.
Oh, pictures. Scroll down.
Oh, you missed it.
Oh, was it the screenshot of that?
It's text pictures.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so this study it's like 14 people with pre-established heart disease.
Oh, sorry, real quick, is this the study he cited, or is this one that you're offering?
Nope, this is the study he cited.
Oh, okay.
So this took 14 people with pre-existing cardiovascular disease. They either had, I think it was either documented plaque, or they actually had a heart attack, a cardiovascular event. And then they gave them 0.6 grams of butter fat. Not oil, butter fat.
Oh, because his argument was just that it was like high fat, right? But
right,
this is
right. It's for oil. So this study is
Yeah.
looking at butter fat, and not only is it looking at butter fat, it's looking at 0.6 grams per pound body weight. Which, if we're generous and we say, okay, like maybe an average male is like 160 pounds, that's 100 grams of butter fat.
How much
That's
is that in like
absolutely of just butter fat.
cups? Oh my god.
So, like, what are you suggesting here? Like, okay, maybe and they say this, they're like pretty clear with like, I want to say it's the bottom one. Yeah, so the bottom one, and they observed that, okay, like 4 or 5 hours, which is like the peak lactescence, which like he described as fat in the blood. Well, like, yeah, you ingested fat, you're going to have fat in your blood. That's how it works. So the peak 4 to 5 hour concentration of this quote milky blood, they had, it was how many of them? I think it was like six of the 14 had like perceived angina, which is chest pain. So they basically say that with an extremely high butterfat meal with people with already compromised vascular function, this may be a problem. Like that last picture that I keep clicking on. It's like these observations suggest to us that in humans, the chylomicrons, which are basically like after digestion, it's what carries fat in your blood, of postprandial lipemia may exert a similar adverse effect on the myocardium, and that this effect is probably small and might most easily be demonstrable in patients whose myocardial blood supply is already compromised by severe coronary atherosclerosis.
Okay, so just to summarize this, he cited a study that didn't even look at oil. It looked at butter fat. But he was trying to
Yes.
justify this on the basis of, oh, it's, a high fat diet. But I'm assuming, like, with butter fat, there's things like saturated fat, cholesterol, things like that.
Correct.
And not only that, but they were feeding them like just exorbitantly high amounts of it, 900 calories to be exact. And all of these people had pre-existing heart conditions. And even then,
Right.
they're like, the effect is probably small. And this effect would only probably be seen within people with these pre-existing conditions.
Right. So maybe with someone with severe atherosclerosis, you shouldn't feed them 100 grams of butter fat in a single meal.
Yeah.
That's about as much as you can take away from this. So this really does not support the argument he's making if it's relevant to oil and it's relevant to normal people and it's relevant to doses that a human would consume, like not being force-fed 100 grams.
Oh, but we did look at oil, remember? You just had to eat a quarter cup of it a day to get the results from that study, which weren't even bad.
Yeah, totally. A different marker, but yeah, same thing.
That's funny.
And yeah, so let's go to the next one.
Okay, I'm gonna scooch back a little bit. There we go.
This up. 6. Increase.
Sorry, I just want to draw special attention to that last thing he said about how he thinks this might impede athletic performance, but he doesn't have any evidence to substantiate it. I think that's funny. Anyway.
Athletic performance. So currently I know of no studies with which to back this up. 6. Increased diabetes risk. According to the Adventist 2 review study, vegans have 60 to 68% less chance of developing type 2 diabetes. We know that intramyocellular lipids, fats, mostly from animal products inside muscle cells, block insulin signaling, causing the disease. It's been postulated that oils likely cause intramyocellular lipids to accumulate too. 7.
Okay. So note how he says postulated. So he doesn't even have evidence for this. Aside from that, the intramyocellular lipid model of diabetes has been disproven. Intramyocellular lipids are not what is directly causal in insulin resistance, which is characteristic of diabetes. And I actually there's a very recent review on it, and it's incredibly long. This is one of the longest, most referenced reviews I've ever seen on like disease pathology.
Is it this mechanisms of insulin action and insulin resistance?
Right. Yeah. It's like if you scroll, it's gigantic. It's like I don't know how many pages it is.
91 in the PDF.
And there's like 200 references, and they just go deep into the mechanisms. And in no way is intramyocellular lipid determined as the main causal factor. And they elaborate on it's incredibly complex, and at best what we can say is most likely the like switch that flips you from insulin sensitive to insulin resistant and then diabetic is accumulation of fat in areas where there's not supposed to be fat. So like around your organs, and it impedes organ function and therefore impedes insulin's function, and therefore you have insulin resistance. And that's just a piece of the puzzle, but it's a major piece, and that's caused by energy oversupply. So
excessive calories?
Right. You have way more calories than you need. You put on weight where you're not supposed to. You increase your risk of diabetes. There's a great concept called there's a researcher, Roy Taylor, and he basically determined this concept of a personal fat threshold. And because people deposit fat in different places at different rates based on different factors, whether it's genetics, whatever, the personal fat threshold is basically the amount of total fat that you end up having enough on or near organs where it impedes their function, and therefore you develop insulin resistance and develop diabetes. And like I said, that basically just comes back to, okay, it's an energy oversupply. You're overburdening your system and you're impairing its function. It's not any unique nutrient that's causing this effect. It's chronic oversupply of calories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But oil is so dense in calories, it'll cause diabetes.
Well, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there.
Okay. We get to continue?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think I missed.
Okay.
Oils start to oxidize and go rancid once extracted, leading to elevated cancer risk. Though oils will have expiry dates, these can often be useless due to incorrect storage. Studies show that oils with a year's expiry date could be rancid in as little as 2.5 weeks after manufacture. The high heat produced when cooking oils, rancid or otherwise, causes more of these toxins to be released. 8. The roasting or frying of starches.
So he links a study that looks at oils on shells, and they basically test their rancidity, and they like determine it by extrapolating the production of byproducts that are associated with oil breakdown from high temperatures. And they make this curve, and they say, okay, these oils go rancid in X amount of time under Y conditions. Therefore, a lot of them have like dates that are actually longer than they truly last. But it's true for some of them, and then some of them pretty much maintain very close to their actual date. And then on top of that, both oils themselves and oils that are used in cooking that are exposed to high heat. Again, if we look at the outcomes, consistently we see that they actually have no effect on diabetes, or they reduce the risk of diabetes. So it just doesn't pan out. Like, unless, granted, this is when calorie intake is considered. If you're if you're drinking cups of oil and you're getting way more calories than you need, or you're consuming food that, and it's funny because oil gets lumped in with these foods that are like highly processed, that are not only just oil, but they have a good amount of oil, like cakes, cookies, pastries, whatnot, but they also have refined carbohydrate, they have added sugar, all these things. And yeah, okay, those can contribute to an excess energy supply. And if you consistently eat those foods all the time, way more than you actually need on an energy basis, then yeah, they could contribute to. But when you actually use it like a normal human, like you use it for cooking, or you maybe have those snacks every once in a while, but you don't base your diet around them, then we see no significant increase in risk, or we see a significant decrease in risk of diabetes and cancer and cardiovascular disease. And I linked plenty of research divulging that in the document. It's just way too much to go through, but just the point is
sorry?
that the outcomes do not at all support the speculations he's making just because these effects occur.
So when it's like linked to decreased rates of like diabetes, would that be because maybe when people cook with oils, perhaps it's more satiating, so they're less likely to just like eat a ton of like crap? I don't know. That would just be my guess. Oh, really?
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, no. Like, Nick actually brought this up. I think it was Nick that I was having a discussion once with him, and like he brought it up. It's like, yeah, like a lot of people use it just sparingly to like fry vegetables or roast vegetables, and like you find it more delicious, and you eat more. Like you're eating oil, but you're eating more vegetables, and you're getting a ton of volume with it, and you're satisfied by the food. So therefore, you don't overeat, and that's definitely one way by which it could end up reducing the risk. But like the thing is, a lot of these, although it's not perfect, a lot of these studies do consider caloric intake, and even then, it shows a reduction in risk. So
yeah, it seems like a lot of the sort of health detriments people attribute to oil are actually just because of like excess calorie intake or increased saturated fat, or maybe even increased cholesterol, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's funny because like you can actually point out studies where it's like, oh man, look at this study. It shows there's like a borderline or a significant increase in risk, and you go and look at that study, and it makes no consideration for those. It doesn't it either doesn't account for energy, it doesn't account for like the co-consumption of saturated fat or processed foods. And obviously, like I said, like I'll admit that that's where that's going to be a problem.
Mhm.
Um, but otherwise, no, that's not. It doesn't pan out.
Mhm. Also, for those of you guys who are just joining us, just to remind you that where's the live stream chat? Let me post it. You can join the Discord and hop in a Q&A later after the stream if you have any questions or concerns you would like cleared up. It's also linked in the description, and all of Matt's references, I have them open here. They're also in the Discord under the category for this event, so you can check that out if you like. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about with respect to that point?
No, I think we can move on.
All right.
8. The roasting or frying of starches, such as potatoes for making chips, creates acrylamides, a probable carcinogen. 9.
Okay,
the
pause.
roasting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so note how he said probable carcinogen. Yes, it has been shown in animal models to be a probable carcinogen when they administer large doses to animals. The problem with that is, one, obviously it's large doses. So, and when I say large, I mean like if you actually look at the amount of like any food that has an appreciable amount of acrylamide, like the amount you'd have to consume is just insane. On top of that, and like even the I want to say it's the WHO. No, NIH, the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute specifically, acknowledges that animals and humans, or rodents and humans, excuse me, because humans are animals, rodents and humans metabolize acrylamide differently, in such a way that humans are actually exposed to less of the byproduct that's supposedly carcinogenic in animals or in rodent models. So, and then on top of that, like this is like where everything comes back, and which is most important is like what happens when we look at the outcomes in humans that are consuming different amounts of acrylamide or acrylamide containing foods that we know they have high or low concentrations. And when you look into that data, you find the same thing. There's like, okay, there's no significant increase in risk of cancer with higher consumption of acrylamide through the diet.
I'm trying to. I was trying to find the source that he cited for this because I don't know. It just would have been funny if it was like a rat study. Do you happen to remember taking a look at what he cited to support this?
I don't think he actually cited anything for that one.
Okay. Also, for the document, when you say sources listed, would that be his sources, or is this just an extension of your own sources?
That's his.
Oh, okay, okay.
Those are the ones in the video description.
Okay.
There's an anonymous rabbit in here.
Yeah, there's a couple people. There's a loris.
An anonymous loris. And a coyote. Are you the coyote?
I don't think so. I might be the rabbit because I don't see the rabbit.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see anything listed that pertains to this point, so.
Yeah, like, well, I think it's the WHO. He's correct. They classify it as a probable carcinogen, and it's based on the animal model studies. And I think even in the link, the link to the NIH that I threw in there, which is like in the section on this claim, they acknowledge that. They acknowledge it's based on rodent studies, carcinogenicity. That's a word in rodent models, and they also acknowledge that the human evidence has been inconsistent and it's pretty much not really supported role.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's funny. I mean, animal models are just like notoriously unreliable. So it blows my mind that anyone would cite them.
Yeah, I mean, like they're It's hard because you really don't. Oh, Nick Dolores. You don't want to downplay. Like they have, like in the past, there's been major breakthroughs that have come from either in vitro or in vivo or animal model studies. So like you don't want to like ignore that, but like we
Mhm.
need to acknowledge the fact that when you actually look at translation rates from whether it's the cell culture studies or model studies, like across the vast majority of outcomes, especially carcinogenicity and like cardiovascular outcomes, the translation rates are terrible to
Mhm.
humans. Like
Mhm.
it's like when you get to humans and you test it in humans, or you conduct a study that's looking at different levels of exposures in humans, they end up not finding what they did in rodents. Which,
Mhm.
like, I mean, the metabolism difference is one thing, the dose difference is another thing. There's plenty of factors, but
Yeah, it sounds like animal studies that, and obviously we're not speaking upon the ethics of this because the ethics of this and what it's
right.
contributed to science are two distinct things, right? Sounds like animal models, you should approach them in sort of the same way you approach observational data, and that they can be interesting. They can spark, studies to investigate a certain hypothesis, like human studies, but they in and of
Right.
themselves shouldn't be used to establish like causality within humans or anything like that.
Exactly.
Okay. Although we shouldn't be testing on animals at all, obviously, before people
Yeah,
are like yelling at me in the comments.
I know. Yeah, no, I don't. I agree. And like,
Mhm.
it seems like I think even now we might have tools available that are like amazing.
Mhm.
In like some of the research that I was doing for another product, I was finding what they call like in situ models, which is basically like a computerized cellular study, and they like develop this algorithm to like test the effect of different chemicals on certain receptors in like
Hmm.
human serum. It's like really cool. I hope
Mhm.
more things like that become applicable, and like hopefully the translation rate is better and we also don't have to breed and kill and
Mhm.
inject and do all these terrible things to animal models.
Yep. That would be ideal. Preaching to the
Right.
choir, of course, we're all vegans here, I think. Unless Aaron Luce is like hiding in the shadows of this live chat or
Oh
something.
no.
But is that all you wanted to say about that point?
Yep.
Okay, we can move on.
Probable carcinogen. 9. The roasting or frying of protein and fats creates advanced glycation end products, a gerontotoxin that accelerates the aging process throughout every tissue of the body. This
Mm.
Okay. So like that last part is true. It's a like quote toxin in high amounts in the body that can accelerate aging. It's been implicated in a bunch of disease in cell culture studies, and sometimes even when they measure levels in humans, and they find that it correlates with disease. But the problem is, diet is not the only source, and he kind of left out that like it's protein and fat, but it's protein and fat reacting with sugars,
Mm.
um, that like basically catalyze this reaction and the formation of advanced glycation end products. And in the body, when there's greater amounts of inflammation, greater amounts of oxidative stress, that's when those things form. And greater inflammation and greater oxidative stress are part of disease pathology. So, yeah, when you have disease pathology and you have an increased concentration of AGEs,
And what are
yeah, I would
AGEs?
the advanced glycation end products is
Oh,
what he's talking about,
oh, okay.
which is what it's you would expect them to track with disease outcomes because they're part of the pathology. If you were to just look at, okay, these people have higher levels and they also have disease, like yeah, that's it's because they're basically a product of the pathology.
Mhm.
Um,
Mm.
and when we look at actual foods, like there's been plenty of data that kind of divulges like what foods specifically have higher or lower concentrations of advanced glycation end products. Uh, we find that some of them uh, correlate with worse outcomes, but the problem is that those some are foods that also have other compounds we know to increase disease risk. It's like red meat, processed meat, other things like that. They have saturated fat, they have cholesterol, they have choline, they have other things that might modulate disease risk, and therefore they increase disease risk. But when you look at other foods that also have higher AGE levels, but don't have those components, like say nuts are commonly consumed roasted, and because they're high in protein and high in fat, they will react with the sugars and they'll form the advanced glycation end products. So they'll have a decent amount of advanced glycation end products. And the same thing goes for soy products like tofu, edamame, all these things roasted. But when you consume more of those, your disease risks go down. So it's just pointing to the fact that it's not the advanced glycation end products likely that's causing the problems. It's the other constituents in those foods.
Mm-hmm.
And we know pretty well that when you're consuming foods that still have high levels but are otherwise healthy, then you don't see that effect.
Okay. Also, Vegan Mooncat mentions that he finds a low-fat diet easier for himself. That's totally fine. We're not here to tell anyone they have to eat
Yeah,
oil.
well, again, like that's I like we'll get to the end, and like the last point that Hench makes, I agree with. I mean, there's context to be added, but I agree with it, and it's kind of oriented around that point, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah. Obviously, if a low-fat diet works for you, find that's easier, totally go for it. We're just here to tell you that cooking your vegetables in a little bit of oil is probably not going to kill you. All right, we can continue.
Could result in dementia, macular degeneration, atherosclerosis, and sarcopenia or muscle wastage, to name but a few. 10. Most.
Right.
Well, like I said, those disease pathology that's accompanied by oxidation or a reactive oxygen species, which catalyze oxidative reactions, and inflammation will increase the formation. So yes, you're going to see higher concentrations of advanced glycation end products with those diseases, but whether it's a bystander or causal is not well established. And I actually linked quite a few studies that emphasize the fact that yeah, they are part of disease pathology, but whether they independently drive it is not settled. And like I pointed out with the examples with foods that are high in AGs, and they reduce those disease risks.
So when you say it's part of the disease pathology, do you just mean that these sorts of things are associated with like diseases, but we don't know that they cause them? They could just be like a byproduct of the disease?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they literally are part of those disease pathologies. Like, it happens, but it's like in the process of the disease.
It could very well be the case that it's like the disease that is enabling these sort of processes within people's bodies. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then of course, like you said, this is sort of considering this in conjunction with the fact that when people don't have these diseases and when they're consuming healthier foods with these AGEs, these higher AGEs, we don't really see any bad health outcomes, and sometimes we even see better health outcomes.
Right.
Okay. Let's see, there it is.
Most oils are pro-inflammatory, leading to chronic pain and disease. The exception is flaxseed oil, which is rich in the anti-inflammatory omega-3, though this is destroyed by cooking. Not so in the case of omega-3 in ground flaxseed form. It is far healthier to get our omega-3s from ground flax or ground chia seeds.
Okay, you want to pause it? So this is this has to be the most egregious claims he makes in this whole video, because it's nonsense. It's been tested again and again and again. And every time we feed people more, whether it be canola, olive oil, soybean oil, whatever you want to talk about, in randomized controlled trials, we see they either have no significant impact on any of the inflammatory markers tested, or they lower them. So it's just not supported by the human evidence at all.
Did he cite anything?
Oh, maybe he did. I can't remember if he did. Let me scroll up.
I don't see anything.
He probably didn't. DNA damage, yes. So, yeah, I don't think he did. But I did. And I cited this meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, and like almost all of the interventions are oils, and it was looking at a specific type of fat, and the omega-6, it's an omega-6 fatty acid, it's called linoleic acid, and he'll go on about blah 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 harms of linoleic acid, and we'll touch on that later. But this meta-analysis basically took all the individual trials that added linoleic acid to the diet and looked at what happened to inflammatory markers, and that not a single one of them showed a significant increase following the intervention with more linoleic acid provided by a variety of oils. And Nick says he wants to pop into discussion issues. I actually got it. I didn't write it on the thing, but I wanted to note this, that there's two of them. I linked a later one, and the earlier one was very, very forward with their conclusion. They said there is virtually no evidence in humans to suggest that linoleic acid increases inflammatory markers. But this later one actually it found similar, but they did a dose response. So they're like, okay, maybe like higher doses are bad. And like for one of the inflammatory markers, it was C-reactive protein, or CRP for short. They were like, okay, it looks like maybe with higher doses of CRP, they might increase, or higher doses of CRP, higher doses of linoleic acid, they might increase CRP. But the problem is, if you go to those actual studies, there's like 3 or 4 that are the higher doses that suggest that it increased CRP. If you go to those individual studies, not a single one significantly increased CRP following the linoleic acid invention, which I think one of them was rapeseed oil, one of them was I don't know if it was soybean or something else, but like not a single one of them.
Sorry, when you say significantly, are you speaking in terms like statistical significance, or do you mean like significant as in to a degree that's problematic?
Right. In this case it would be both, because
okay.
I mean, like it's that's a long discussion to make the distinction, but the thing is, it didn't significantly increase them, and like in most cases, if you actually look at like the point value, or like the point estimate, it lowered them, just not significantly. So if you really want to go to like, oh, even though it's not significant, it might be clinically significant. No, it's still like either lowered them or like didn't touch them like in any manner that's meaningful. And the problem was, the reason they were like, oh, like we saw an increase with those things, but then you go to the studies and they showed there's no increase, or they decreased following the intervention from baseline, is that they basically used a method where they like standardize the changes in the inflammatory marker, and that involves like usually converting them all to the same unit, because some studies use different units, and it also involves taking them and comparing them to the change that was seen in the control group. When you do that, because of the way, like the biggest problem was like one study, they got this like, you look at the value and it's like, whoa, like there's this huge increase in CRP, like what's going on there? And you go and look and you see that from baseline, the group that was fed the higher amount of linoleic acid didn't have a significant increase, and I think it even like marginally decreased. The problem was that they took the values in those studies, which they gave the median CRP, and then they gave the range of the values, and they used a calculator to find out, okay, based on the median and the range of those values, what's the mean, which is, I mean, average in this case. I hope most people like understand the distinction between median and mean, which median's like the center value of the data set, and mean is the average of the data set. When they use this calculator to convert, there was this ridiculous outlier in one of the groups. I want to say it was the group that was fed the linoleic acid. There was this ridiculous outlier that caused a huge skew in the mean when you do that calculation. So it gave this like basically erroneous mean that was like skewed by this outlier, despite the fact that if you actually look at the medians across the groups, then you see there's no significant increase. But when they made that conversion, it skewed the mean in a way that when they made the comparison in like their standardized way, they saw that, oh, it had this increase. But it was totally just an artifact of them using a calculator to do a rough conversion. And yeah, Nick's commenting. It was like for the baseline for the olive oil group, so like the group that compared to. Oh yeah, so that's what happened was like when they did the conversion for the olive oil group, which is the group they ended up comparing the linoleic acid to, which I think they did canola oil in this one, which would have been the source of linoleic acid or omega-6. The thing was like at baseline, the olive oil had this like egregiously high upper bound. It was an outlier. And because of that, it made their baseline super high, the mean super high. So by the end of the trial, when this person that had this like spuriously high value at baseline, when it was no longer spuriously high following the intervention, it looked like there was a massive decrease in the mean in the olive oil group, so that when you compared that massive increase to, or massive decrease to what was also a decrease in the linoleic acid group, it was like so inflated that it made the linoleic acid group look like it increased CRP because they were basically trying to find the difference in the changes. So like the olive oil group with that spuriously high saw this massive, like, let's make up a number. Let's make up like, they saw this massive like 15-point reduction in the CRP. But then like you look at the linoleic acid and like while it saw 5-point reduction, when you compare those two, it looks like the linoleic acid compared to the olive oil was 10 points higher. So that's what gave them this spurious value.
Also, I'm just going to address a couple things from the chat. Let me scroll up. So, Vegan Mooncat saying that, oh my god, there's like a little fly. Probably not going to kill you if you can control the amount and use a little oil. I agree, but it's much easier to overdo processed fats in comparison to whole foods. I think that might be the case with some people, but like we were talking about earlier, in some studies, there was shown a benefit to including oil in the diet, and this is because it made healthier whole foods more palatable to people, right? And encouraged them to eat more vegetables because they could cook them with oil and make them taste better. They were less likely to overeat because, you know, vegetables have a lot of volume. It made them feel more satiated. So it kind of depends on the individual.
I don't want to like swat them away, but like I've said, we'll get to that. Like I want to discuss that at the end. Like he brings up his final point is, oh, calorie density, blah blah blah. We'll discuss that. And like I touched on it earlier, and you brought up the point about, okay, maybe like if you just use it to cook food, it's just a little bit and it's not really contributing all that much to calories. It makes the food more palatable. You're more satiated in the end. Therefore, it doesn't have that effect. And then like I said, like, oh yeah, okay, if you're considering processed foods, which also have like refined carbohydrates, they have more added sugar, they have other things on top of the oil. Yeah. And you're like basically like getting food volume as low as possible, but calories as high as possible. Yeah, those things are easy to overeat, of course.
And also, we'll have a Q&A after as well, because I don't want to stop the stream too much to address the chat, which means some people's concerns are going to go unaddressed. But by the time we finish going over the video, we're going to open up the Discord to a Q&A channel, and you can hop in and talk that way too. So, and of course, link is in the description. Oh, where's the thing? Here it is. Was there anything else you wanted to add to that point?
Nope, that's it for that point.
Okay.
11. Omega-6 is highly reactive with oxygen, which can damage cells and DNA, elevating cancer risk. 12.
Okay, so technically, and I wrote like a good description of this, I think, or at least a succinct description of it in the document. Technically, yeah, omega-6 fatty acids can get oxidized, but they get oxidized to provide energy for cellular processes. It's a normal physiological process. And yes, you can have certain byproducts that are, quote, bad. That's literally like the process of life. Like to produce to use oxygen to produce energy produces harmful byproducts that are harmful in high doses when there's a disbalance in those harmful byproducts and the regular cellular defense systems. But just because that happens, like it happens normally. It happens if you live. Like it's how things work. It doesn't mean that they increase risk. And like again, back to the outcome-based evidence. Like it shows they decrease risk, or they have no effect on risk, no significant effect on risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he kind of like points to cancer for that one. Pro-inflammatory disease, reactive with oxygen. Yeah, damages cells and DNA equals cancer. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's how you wrote it. And I just said, yeah, this overlooks the human evidence, and I cited quite a few extensive meta-analyses on cancer, and it's whether they measure, okay, like these people ate more in their diet, or okay, they had more in their serum, which because linoleic acid is an essential fatty acid, or because you can't synthesize it in your body with precursors, it's an essential fatty acid, which means you have to consume it from the diet because you can't produce it without it. Because of that, your serum concentrations or the concentrations in erythrocytes or red blood cells can be a good marker for intake. So it's sometimes used to assess, okay, like people with the higher concentrations have a higher habitual dietary intake, and like it's a great way to look at, okay, people who consume more, are they at a higher risk? And we consistently find, whether you look at diet records or whether you look at these more objective serum records, serum concentrations or blood cell concentrations or lipid concentrations, wherever you want to look, there's a significant reduction in the risk of these diseases.
Mm-hmm. Okay, was there anything else you wanted to add, or are we good to continue with the video?
Nope, you can continue.
The consumption of high amounts of omega-6 is linked to depression and elevated suicide risk, likely due to the damage that it can cause to the intestinal wall.
Okay, we already addressed the intestinal wall thing, but the depression thing, he links a single cross-sectional study, which you're familiar with. It's like a single time point. You take two groups of people and you look like, okay, is this certain thing, in this case the higher consumption of omega-6, associated with an outcome? And they looked at depression. This single cross-sectional study says like, oh, okay, people who consume more had a higher depression risk or suicide risk. Well, not only did they was it cross-sectional, which means like you really can't establish temporality, meaning that like, okay, the higher consumption of omega-6 preceded the onset of depression. Could just be that people that are depressed happen to be consuming higher amounts when they get investigated in this analysis.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, if you actually look at prospective studies, and there was a really good study that I found that shows how much of a problem this is. I kind of skipped over. I hate to like sound squirrely, but I skipped over when I said on top of that. I meant to go to another point. I totally lost it, but I remembered they didn't consider, okay, were people who were consuming higher amounts of omega-6 just consuming a ton of junk food, and they had a terrible diet.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, yeah, that could be a valid reason that maybe those people are at a higher risk of depression. That would totally make sense, but they didn't really consider that. Their adjustment model was pretty paltry, and they didn't make appropriate considerations for that. So now back to what I was going to move on to. The study that I found, which funnily enough didn't even do that. Like it didn't even, I would have liked more consideration for, okay, maybe they're consuming much more junk food. They considered calories, and I think they considered BMI, which can be really good proxies. Like, okay, yeah, someone's consuming a ton more calories, or they have a much higher BMI, they're eating a junk food diet, maybe they're at a higher risk. So I guess those could be considered decent proxies for a really junky diet. But the study was great because it did a cross-sectional analysis and it did a prospective analysis. So you see super clearly, if you want to go to the third link, the one, yeah, right where my cursor is, right there. If you want to go to that one, and you go to, click on the results, it might just bring you to the figures. Scroll down a little bit.
Is it this?
Okay. Can I scroll up so I can see the title of that? Odds ratios for association between plasma and... Right, okay. Total Lampusas. You want to scroll down a little bit again? Oh yeah, there's the cross-sectional associations.
This one?
I don't know if it's the table. Yeah, okay, so if you look at that one, they have like the list of what the exposure is, so like what they're looking at to see if it affects risk. And you look at you can look at either total N6 PUFAs, which is omega-6 fatty acids, and they actually found that higher consumption of that didn't significantly increase risk. But, and this is where this hypothesis comes from, people are like, oh, the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, if you have more omega-6, because omega-6 fatty acids can be precursors for inflammatory molecules, and like that's a very vague, like some of them are very important inflammatory molecules that have roles in normal cellular processes. Some of them can be bad. Just because they're possible precursors, if you have more of those and less omega-3s, which can be possible precursors for antioxidant and anti-inflammatory molecules, then therefore you're going to have a higher risk of depression. And you'll see in their cross-sectional analysis, they found that a higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio significantly increased the risk of psychotic disorder, moderate depressive disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. But when you go to, and I think it's a little bit after that one.
Scroll down again. What's this? Is it table 4?
Longitudinal, yeah. So click on that one. When you go to the one that actually looked at, okay, let's follow people up. Let's look at their levels at a baseline, and let's see if their consumption of, or higher consumption of omega-6 or a higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio predicts depression. As in, like, okay, yeah, we can say maybe it's a factor that increases your risk. When you actually look at that, there's no significant increase in risk with a higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio for any of the outcomes. So that's me really highlighting, like, you can't take a cross-sectional analysis that only looks at a single time point, that doesn't give you the ability to look at, was their consumption over a longer time, did that precede the onset of depression? You can't really establish that temporality aspect. And when you do, or when you make considerations for it, you don't see a significant increase in risk. And like I said, I would have liked, like, I think they mentioned body mass index, age at attendance, BMI, cigarettes. Like, that's a really paltry model. Like, I would want it to be better than that. And they still found no significant increase in risk, like excluding a bunch of factors that could influence depression. So this is such a weak, such a tenuous association. And like, to cite that single study to claim that is absurd.
Mhm.
And then I included a few other, we won't go into them, but I included a few other, like, oh, people are like, okay, like increase your omega-3 so that decreases the omega-6 to 3 ratio because you're increasing the size of the denominator, and maybe that'll improve your depression. And even that, when tested, there's plenty of interventional trials that give omega-3 supplements, and they find that it does not significantly reduce the risk of depression. There's a really recent one that was actually published 2 or 3 months ago. Actually, it might even be less than that. That found that I can't remember if they separated the like different types of omega-3 fatty acids, but one of them was associated with an increased risk of onset of depression. Um, in a randomized controlled trial supplementing. So this whole like, oh, the ratio depression is like really founded on like terribly weak evidence, and it just like the fact that he like cited a single study suggests that, and it's cross sectional, is like that's like like a really blatant display of like I'm not doing my research.
So basically, when he cited a cross-sectional study, all that did was look at the association between these two things in a specific point in time. But then people were like, "Wait, well, what if you look at what happened before that? Like, did this increased rate of consumption of omega-6 actually precede increased rates of depression? Because if it
Right,
didn't, then it's like, how could it cause it, right? And when you
right,
look at that, it didn't, right? It didn't
yep,
precede depression. Okay,
right.
okay, that's funny.
And
Um,
that's without even like considering like, oh, is this person eating like a ton of junk? Are they eating like sugary
right.
foods, like highly processed foods all the time? Even without that, like I would want to consider that.
Mhm.
Um, so like I'm open, like if we get an analysis that does that and then it shows maybe it increases risk, like okay, I would consider it then, but that's not what we have.
Mhm. Yeah. Like even if this was true that this did happen, we don't have any evidence to suggest that there's actually a causal relationship between these two things.
Correct. And the interventional trials that are trying to like modulate the ratio, if the ratio is actually the thing that matters, they basically shown that it doesn't have a significant effect on depression incidence. If anything, the recent one suggested that some of those omega-3 fatty acids might increase risk.
Hmm. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to mention, or are we good to continue?
No, I think that's good.
All right.
13. Even cold pressed oils contain trans fats, which lead to an elevated heart disease, cancer, and obesity risk. The World Health Organization says that there is no safe intake level for trans fats.
Was there something you wanted to say, or did you want to
No,
finish?
let him say the study
Okay.
first because I want to cover what he called the study.
Okay.
One study found non-hydrogenated plant oils in supermarkets to contain up to a whopping 5% trans fats. 14.
Okay,
Okay.
pause. the the reference to the World Health Organization, he says they claim that there's no safe intake level. I don't know where they got that. Like, it's just an appeal to authority. And like, if you want to show me evidence that any intake increases the risk of those outcomes, sure, I'll take it on board. But if you actually look at dose responses for trans fats, you need to get like appreciably high intakes before the onset of those. I say appreciably high, but like the foods that they're like highly concentrated in that were a problem and are now outlawed because of this. It was much easier to get them, like the actually partially hydrogenated oils. And the partial hydrogenation process is what introduces more trans fat and it makes it have a way higher concentration. So like you don't need to consume much to get a substantial amount of trans fats and increase your disease risk. But it's not the case that 0 to 1 increases risk and like it just infinitely increases. It's the case that when you get like 3, 4, 5, 6 grams per day from 1 or 0, that's when you see an increased risk. And like the study that he cites suggests, like he says, up to a whopping 5%. So I don't know in what world that's a lot in comparison to they actually partially hydrogenated trans fats. So like first of all, let's point out that whopping 5% is a single sample, and it's an outlier. It was like a canola oil. There were 3 canola oil samples, I want to say, and it was a single sample, and they found, okay, it had like slightly higher, it had 5%. And they explain like, oh, this is an outlier. There's probably something that went wrong in the production process or that predisposed it to forming higher amounts. But even with that considered, 5%, like you would have to consume 100 grams of oil to get like the 5 grams, which is where we see really substantial increases in risk. And it's just not the case that if you look at databases that are way more extensive and have way more samples and test fatty acid content of these oils, it's like nowhere near that. It's like it's like 1%. Some of them are down to like less than 1% at most. So it's just
sorry.
It's weird that like, okay, yeah, like one sample had up to 5%. Like even then, like, are you going to consume 100 grams of that oil and get 5 grams of trans fat? Even if you consume half, it's 2.5 grams, which is like nothing. 50 grams of oil is over a quarter cup again. It's that freaking olive oil study all over again.
So
it's just,
is it like this idea of like if you're consuming substantial amounts of these things, then yes, it does become problematic.
Right.
But like people aren't actually consuming this level of cold pressed oils.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Is there anything
and
else?
Again, I'll point back. What happens when we look at the outcomes for these oils that supposedly have trans fats in them? I mean, he's pointing to a single outlier sample in whatever, but like when there's greater consumption, whether they're cooked or whether they're consumed raw, no, we don't see increases in the risk of those conditions.
Okay, was there anything else you wanted to add to that, or do you want to go on to the next point?
No, we can move on.
All right.
Oil is the most calorically dense substance on the planet, almost pure fat with a whopping 9 calories per gram. Where you could fill your stomach to bursting with 400 calories coming from vegetables, you'd be merely coating the bottom of your stomach with the same amount of calories coming from oil. As such, it is a massive driver of obesity. 15.
All right.
Okay. There's a calorie point. Now, if you're somebody that has difficulties with calories and you have difficulties keeping under, I mean, like some people have really low basal metabolic rates, which means the amount of energy they burn at rest, or they don't exercise a lot and they have low. And like adding an appreciable amount of oil or oil-containing foods might bump them over the calorie intake they need. Yeah, okay, if that's the case, and oil's gonna like be the like bottleneck to you staying under a calorie intake that won't increase weight gain, sure, like you can decrease or eliminate your consumption. Like I'll grant that. That's a good point. But the case is, like, most of the time, people are not just taking, like, the graphic is so bizarre. Like the 400 calories of oil versus 400 calories of, like, no, you're not going to consume a freaking cup of oil and nothing else. You're going to put a little bit on a ton of veggies that you're roasting, and that will increase the volume, and you'll be satisfied. Like I mentioned earlier, like incorporating some fat into a meal will slow your gastric emptying, so it might actually provide additional satiety through another mechanism than besides food volume. There's way more than one mechanism behind satiety. So it's not always the case, and like if it is the case that like, okay, you like, if you add it or if you consume foods with oils and like it's going to bump your calorie intake too high and like you're not comfortable with that and you can't like find a way to manage your calorie intake where you want it to be, like, okay, you can limit oils or you can like take them out, like, but that doesn't mean that they increase all these disease risks that he's claiming, which, I mean, time and time again has been tested. It's not the case. And it doesn't mean you need to make all these wacky mechanistic claims like, oh, they cause all these diseases because of these increases postprandially within a normal range of these certain markers. So that's kind of where that stands.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, we were kind of alluding to this earlier, right? Where there could absolutely exist circumstances in which it would be beneficial to someone to exclude or
Right.
minimize oil if it's like a case that when they do that they just find it's easier to like keep their calorie intake to like a level that's healthy. But then a lot of cases the context that people are consuming oil in, like cooking some vegetables in it, using it in a little bit of like salad dressing, whatever, is really not
Right.
gonna do much.
Right.
And
And the thing is, like, you can literally just posit the opposite. Like, somebody that needs a lot of calories, they're having a plenty varied diet, but like they're just consuming so much food volume, they can't get enough calories without something that's calorically dense, like oil. It can
yeah.
help them reach their calorie goals. Um, and it's funny because I literally know, like I said, I've watched Hench videos in the past. Like some of his content's funny. I've watched it before and I enjoyed it. And he's had times where he's had like substantial like gastrointestinal distress where it's hard for him to eat food volume and he just chugs maple syrup because it's such a calorically dense food. Like, what's the difference?
Well, maybe Hench will watch this and know that, you know, just incorporating some more oil into his diet isn't gonna lead to all of these things that he's offering it will lead to, and maybe that'll help him. Maybe we'll help Hench out with this. Who knows? That would be ideal, I think. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that's it for like, yeah, that's it.
Let's see what his last point.
Oil is virtually devoid of nutrients. The vast majority of them run down the drain with the water that is expelled during processing. With olive oil, for example, there's a small amount of vitamin E and a minute amount of vitamin K left, along with a few polyphenols. This is a fraction of the nutrition found in whole olives. To put it another way, oil is to olives what sugar is to whole fruit. In summary, there is nothing healthy in oils that can't be better sourced from whole plant foods, but there are a ton of negatives. If you're keen to shorten your
Oh wait, I want to let him finish.
life and perhaps live the last few years with disability, then carry on with the processed food, frying and dousing your salads in oil.
Wait. That's processed food and like dousing stuff in oil. That's different.
Oh, that's so funny.
And saying oil consumption is like that's like that. I feel like an analogy would be like if I try to say that like strawberries are bad because if you eat like cake with strawberry filling, it's bad for you.
Right.
Like if you eat processed food that has oil in it and it's bad for you, that doesn't mean the oil itself is what's bad for you. It means like the food that you're consuming it in is bad for you.
Right.
And
Exactly.
dousing salads in oil.
That's such a bad straw man. But like he makes the like, okay, there's no nutrients. Like he showed that there's a few nutrients, but like you're not consuming oil for its like nutrient diversity. It's used as a cooking tool. It's used to help you roast food. It's used to give you a desired texture. It's used to, in some cases, like I mentioned, increase calorie intake. And the bottom line is that, like, oils themselves, it's funny he like mentioned the LDL earlier. Like, oh, like there's a few of these oils that can increase LDL, and like an oil consuming vegan wouldn't have a very low LDL. Well, the fact of the matter is that in like actual feeding studies that look at replacing saturated fat or trans fat, the things that do significantly increase your LDL, they show that replacement with polyunsaturated fat or monounsaturated fat which are concentrated in like polyunsaturated would be canola, um, what else? Sunflower, safflower, soybean oil, or monounsaturated fat, which olive oil is predominantly monounsaturated fat. Those replacements produce more significant reductions in LDL when replacing saturated fat than do carbohydrates, even whole carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
So like the point you made earlier, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, why would the inclusion of something that actually reduces LDL more when replacing saturated fat lead to a higher LDL? That doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like the same thing goes for when you look at actual. There's a really good study. I can't remember if I actually included it in the thing. I think I was having trouble finding it, but there is a substitution analysis that looked at like, okay, what happens when people replace saturated fat with different foods? Like, okay, I think they looked at nutrients and then maybe food groups, and they looked at omega-6, which was predominantly from oils, or monounsaturated fat, which was predominantly from olive oil, and they found that they reduced cardiovascular disease risk when replacing the same amount of calories from saturated fat to a greater extent than whole grains did. So like your other option, unrefined carbohydrate, which is apparently what he seems to think should be consumed in place of them, actually reduces risk less than replacement of saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat or monounsaturated fat rich oils or other dietary sources. Like
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't pan out in like any way you look at it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you want to add anything else, or do you want to open up the Discord to the Q&A?
Open it up to the Q&A.
All right. Are you able to join the Q&A channel, or do I have to drag you?
Looks like you're in another. I can switch.
Here, I'll just do this. All right, there we go.
Oh, did you put me in there?
Hmm?
I
Yeah.
said you put me in.
I dragged you. I forcibly dragged you. We already have a dissenter in the chat. No fitting analogy, oops, would be to say that, yeah, meat isn't unhealthy because eating a small amount isn't unhealthy.
No, that's not true, because you replace it isocalorically and you see a reduction in risk.
Well, I was gonna, so if you guys want to come into the Discord, we're having a Q&A, you can voice your opinions here, because I feel like going back and forth via a live chat where one person's texting and we're dealing with a delay and we're trying to respond in voice would be pretty infuriating to deal with. So you could join the Discord link in the description if you guys want. There are a few people who seem like they had some contentions that we could iron out, hopefully. I'll just post it again. Oh yeah, and you guys can join the waiting room voice chat. Can I do that? Hold on, let me view the server from the perspective of a member to make sure people can actually. Is that roles? Everyone. Yeah, they can join. I think so. Okay. Mock's in the waiting room, but I can't imagine he has a question. Mock, if you have a question, let me know, but
Oh, no.
I just want this Q&A to be Matt's, unless you know, Matt's like, oh, Mock has something to add. But anyway, while we're waiting, did you want to address that comment more in depth, maybe?
Yeah, like I said, if you actually look at replacements, if you replace whether it be butter, whether it be red meat, whether it be whatever, with monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fatty acids, or which predominantly come from olive oil or canola oil or soybean oil or whatnot, you see equivalent or greater risk reductions than replacing with whole grains, which is an unrefined carbohydrate. So like, no, like how how is it decreasing risk more, but it somehow increases risk
Mm-hmm.
than like supposedly the ideal food to hench? It doesn't make sense at all,
Mm-hmm.
or
Um,
the ideal nutrient, so to speak.
Also, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like one of the greatest points of contention we have with people like Hench Herbivore is that they either implicitly or explicitly argue that you just need to like eliminate oil from your diet. Like the context that you're consuming it in
Right.
is bad, stop doing it, right? When the evidence doesn't
Right.
pan out because the context people are consuming it in is like small, whereas when we look at something like red meats, the context people are consuming it in surpasses the threshold of harm.
Yeah.
So it would be correct to say, like generally speaking, the situations in which people eat red meat is harmful, whereas the
Mhm.
situations in which people typically eat oil is not.
Right.
And it would be incorrect to say that like red meat is
Yeah,
unhealthy at any dose because that's not true.
yeah, no, like we see, like in the case of red meat, yes, there's a threshold. Um, and beyond that threshold, we see increases in risk. Uh, but so when you look at like low consumption to high consumption, if the high is the case that it's enough, which is usually it's like around a serving a day, around 100 grams a day, which
Oh,
and
he's in waiting room. If you just want me to bring him in.
the disease in which, yeah, sure.
Okay, let's bring him in. Hi, Burning Flex. You can talk now. I've dragged you in.
Hey,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I would love to make use of your knowledge,
sure,
if possible. So my question, first of all, would be, what is like the minimum amount that a human actually needs fat, like healthy fats? I mean, people divide that
right,
into healthy fats and unhealthy fats, right? And what
right.
is like the minimum amount that people go to in order to
Okay,
function, to say?
yeah. So there's two essential fatty acids that you need to consume in the diet. Technically, there's more. I'll kind of expand on that in a bit. There's the omega-6 fatty acids and omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-6, I kind of mentioned it in the stream, is predominantly linoleic acid, and that's essential because, like I mentioned, you can't synthesize it uh, endogenously, which means in your body from like precursors. So you need to consume a source of it to get enough. And the same thing goes for the omega-3 fatty acids, which are ALA, DHA, and EPA. And the DHA and EPA are basically longer chain and can be formed from a few reactions from ALA. And ALA is the predominant source in plant-based foods, and both of those are the essentials. And typically, the like offhand, I want to say for linoleic acid, it's like 10 grams per day, and then ALA is typically recommended. It's like around 1.5 to 2. It's probably better to get more because the foods that like the foods that both of these are sourced from are like consistently associated with better health outcomes. You consume more, you have better health outcomes. But like that's the absolute minimum you need.
All right.
But I don't.
And do you have
The,
any like sources where like people were put on extremely like complete exception of any fats except for those that are
yeah,
necessary,
right.
like that we
There's a
cannot?
there's a really good. Um, I think it might be an NIH page that goes through both of those, and that's actually where I got my knowledge of those numbers. They go through the data that they found that okay, like actually the way they found it is when they feed people intravenously. So like when people can't eat by mouth and they have to give them an intravenous dietary formula. They found like the amount that if you go below this amount, you see manifestation of deficiency of omega-6 or omega-3. But if you stay above this amount, you don't see deficiency. That's how those studies were done. Basically, like over the time experience in it's called parental or enteral nutrition, which is the different names are like where you administer parenterals, like you do it in a like vein on your extremities, and enteral is like you kind of like get a tube into the stomach. but that's how they found those. I'll try and find that for you.
All right. Yeah, I would like to look at that.
But like the problem with that, with like looking at, okay, what's the like absolute minimum I need of a nutrient? I don't like that way of looking at nutrients because like
I mean,
in many cases, like consuming more of foods that are going to put you over the absolute minimum need of like a certain nutrient, whether it be protein, carbohydrate, or fat, can have effects, whether it's reducing blood pressure, reducing your LDL, or reducing some other marker that is responsible for increased or decreased risk of certain diseases. If you consume more and like past like the quote need for those nutrients from foods that are healthy, you'll see further risk reduction. So like just looking at like, oh, what's the absolute minimum we need? I don't find to be a great way to go about that, especially if
okay.
the foods are like
I mean,
health promoting.
I asked that question basically just because I see it as if we don't need it per se, like if there's like nothing unique to it, and we already have things that provide the nutrients out of it. In that
Right.
case, fat is like an extracted macronutrient, so to say, or can you like categorize it that way? I don't know. Which carries some vitamins, but more than that, like we have those in whole foods. So having those fats coming from whole foods, is there like because I don't know if you answered that, to be fair, because I came very late to the stream, I'm sorry.
Right. So
Is
there's
there
actually
like
a really good like there's an interventional study that looked at, it considered both. It was a really good they took a Mediterranean diet, it's called the Preface study. They took a Mediterranean diet and they took one version that was Mediterranean diet that was like quote supplemented with which means they basically just used it as the main monounsaturated fat source, olive oil, and then there was one that was quote supplemented with nuts. And they found that compared to like the control group, which wasn't a bad, it was actually a decent diet. Even the control group, it was like wasn't like super high calorie. It had a decent amount of fiber. It was all the things that would be characteristic of a healthy diet. Both the monounsaturated fat from olive oil and from nuts diets significantly decreased the risk of cardiovascular disease with no difference between the two that was detectable. So like,
okay.
With this always comes like the caveat, like if you're gonna like, it's so weird because people always refer to the like, oh, like this amount of oil that's like 400 or 500 calories that's gonna like displace nutrients. It's like, that's not like, I don't think any sane person would just say just chug oil. Like what reason for that would you ever have?
Yeah, I thought it
There
might be
is a huge
useful.
amount of oil being used in processed foods and in restaurants, like
Yeah,
people
right.
who use that lifestyle, which
Yeah.
is what is promoting unhealthy societies in the more developed countries, since that people rely more on fast food, not
Right.
only
Yeah.
unhealthy fast food, but generally just fastly made food, right? Even in the supermarkets.
I don't know if you missed, we kind of touched on like that's a valid point. Like if, okay, maybe like a restaurant, it's like drowning the food in oil, because some restaurants do tend to do that, and like that you consistently eat that and it leads to overconsumption. Or in the case of like you mentioned processed food, but the thing with processed food is it's like not, okay, it's not only oil in the processed food, it's the fact that it also has added sugar, it has refined carbohydrate, and like in every way that is possible to decrease food volume and increase calories is exploited in processed food.
Also,
so
can I
like
just say real quick that neither of us are like ever claiming, to both clarify to you and like the rest of the audience, neither of us are saying that you should incorporate, like it's like, oh, you gotta go out, you gotta eat oil, like you have to eat oil, get your fat through oil, get your nutrients through oil. Our claim has only ever been that you don't need to exclude oil in every situation from your diet in order to be healthy. And also that when you do include it within like the context of like cooking vegetables in it, it's not going to have these adverse health outcomes that a lot of people are claiming it will, right? So when people like Hench Herbivore are going around calling it like the vegan killer and saying that it's associated with all of these
Yeah.
negative health outcomes, that it's not, because the evidence doesn't support that, or the evidence didn't adjust for certain confounders. Like we just, like a lot of this stream was just trying to address that, trying to address the fact that a lot of the evidence he's offering in favor of his claims don't actually pan out.
So I'll go even one step further than what Hench Herbivore is saying, because I have two friends. One of like both are raw vegan defenders, and they they absolutely one of them says directly that whatever you cook in oil, it has oxidative stress in your body because of
Yeah.
the way it reacts by cooking, by heating it up over a specific temperature, and that you would need a lot of antioxidants from berries, etc., whatever it has a lot of it, in order to counter that, even to get to like just to basically counter it and then even exceed health, so to say. So what could I answer to him, like, because he's really scared of cooked food? He like completely says oil is the devil and cooking is even just by default bad.
Also,
Yeah.
also,
Right.
sorry,
We
Matt,
did.
real quick. Do you mind if I drag Nick and Mock in?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
All right.
I don't know if that's anything I was gonna.
Yeah. I mean, I figured you could just say what you were going to say, and then they can jump in when they feel is necessary.
Right. Yeah. So we did. You said you joined late, so I won't like. You probably missed this part. Like there was a point where we went
Probably.
over. He made a claim about oxidative stress, and I'm like, yes, oxidative stress literally occurs in your body whether you consume oil or not, because when you use fat at all as an energy source, whether it's sourced from the diet or whether it's breakdown of actual fat, there's oxidative byproducts. When you it's called oxidative phosphorylation to produce energy. Like that's a normal process in your body. You have these byproducts. That doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. It's like literally how you're producing energy. You die without the energy. You wouldn't be able to support any other
And the
cellular processes. Yeah,
amounts are roughly the same or much more, or how does
right.
that look?
No, there's no real like significant like maybe there's a difference, but like the thing is when you consume more oil, like when we look at oil in the context of a diet, and you consume more rather than less, like okay, the theory is that this oxidative stress is going to increase disease risk. That's not what we see. We see that it actually decreases disease risk. So like regardless of, and I emphasize this like 100 times in the stream, like some mechanistic underlying, like in this case, something that literally happens whether you consume oil or not. We need to look at what actually happens when you do consume it and what happens to humans and what happens to disease risk. And it just doesn't follow. Like, okay, there's more oxidative stress, there's a higher disease risk, that's your theory, then we would see that in the data, but that's not what we see.
And another thing that I got quote like shown by McDougall, you probably know him, and that he is vehemently against oil.
Yeah.
I think so still. Which he claims, and I haven't seen any evidence to that, but he claims that oil is paralyzing your arteries because it's a isolated macronutrient, like
Right.
sugar is, right?
Right.
So it comes into the bloodstream unfiltered, not broken down. It comes directly in there, and yeah, that's his claim. Like, is there any like evidence basis to that, or is that just a wild claim?
It's we kind of went over that too. Like Hench covers like, oh, when you consume like very high fat meals, there's this decrease in what's called flow media dilation, which is basically your blood vessels like ability to dilate or constrict in response to blood flow. There's this decrease after you consume food. The problem is that there's no validation of this decrease like only after consuming food which happens when you consume higher amounts of fat. There's no evidence that that acute decrease like translates to disease risk. And we see in the case of olive oil, in the case of canola oil, in the case of soybean oil, whatever, if you consume more, you decrease cardiovascular disease risk. And like the point that I made when we discussed flow media dilation is that, like I said, it's an acute effect. And if you want to argue that that acute effect is what's harmful, you would also have to take it to the chin that sleep and exercise are harmful to cardiovascular health because they both acutely decrease flow mediated dilation.
Okay. Okay, thank you for answering my questions.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Did the
Yeah.
others join to us?
Hold on. I wanted to make there was a point I wanted to make in which you talked about, processed foods having oil in it, and talked about like restaurant food having oil in it. And this was actually an analogy that Gil Carvalho, I don't know if you guys follow him on Twitter. He's a great YouTube channel, by the way. Nicole, our host, I'm sure will put a plug right now in the chat for everyone to go watch his videos.
I
But
love Gil.
yeah, yeah, Gil. But he made a great analogy to what oil is, and how it relates to the health value of these foods. And it was, it's like you wouldn't claim, and this is based on the science we have up till now, right? You wouldn't claim that soda is unhealthy because it has water in it. Oil is largely the same thing. Just because a processed food has oil in it, that does not inherently make it. There's just a lot of other, there's a lot of other stuff in processed foods. It's, partly devoid of nutrition. It's easy to overconsume, refined carbohydrates, whatnot. But that doesn't mean that none of that is the responsibility of oil. You wouldn't say that the sugar content or in soda, or you wouldn't say that, all the bad things that the sugar is doing to you in soda has anything to do with the water they used to make it. So, and yeah, obviously that's, going to sound like a pretty like, whoa analogy to many people, but with the way the science at least is looking out, I think it's applicable. So yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know if Matt would go as far as to say this, or even Nick, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's I do like I see the problem with like the way people would take it, but it is like I think what you were getting at the end is like when we actually take like, okay, if it's the fact that oil is the cause, and we actually look directly at oil consumption, amounts of oil consumption, then we would see an increase in risk if it was the part of those foods that's causing that. And that's not what we see. We see the opposite.
Right. And with oil, if we were to observe deleterious effects, we should see, remarkably consistent effects across a lot of different scenarios. Like, say, for example, canola oil that's used in processed foods,
Mhm,
and, all different types of diets, all different types of restaurant food. Two, we should also expect a independent effect of oil in something like putting it in an otherwise healthy salad, but we
mhm.
don't, which is
Yeah.
the crux of the matter here. So it's nothing really inherent to oil. And
Mhm,
with caloric density and whatnot, like, are it's oil is healthy to the extent that it doesn't displace other, it doesn't it's unhealthy to the extent that it bars us from getting all the nutrients we need,
mhm,
and having a complete, well planned diet. But you could say that about any food. Like, if I ate just like pineapple, and that was like
mhm.
the only thing I ate, and didn't get enough other nutrients, we would say that about any
Right.
food. So, um, the it's nothing. None of this is specific to oil, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like all these things that people get into, there's always like, well, okay, you could literally apply that to like any food that you're suggesting is good or like is better. Like, oh, like if you only ate a ton of oil and it like displaced the calories and you didn't get nutrients, Like, okay, yeah, like you said, if you ate a bunch of pineapple, like you're not gonna get enough of like tons of nutrients. It's gonna be low in B vitamins. You're gonna displace a ton of those. It's not gonna have vitamin A. It's not gonna have any of the fat soluble vitamins. Like you're right. It just applies to like, and people have to like either accept this or like they have to give a reason why it's different. And like, there is no reason.
Right, and also, I guess the other analogy I think you've talked about research before that has like, a lot of people talk about how calorie dense oils, oils can be and how that can be, an issue in weight management. And while I don't disagree that that can be the case, as far as I know, I think you've shown me trials before where they fed, you know, olive, people olive oil with vegetables and the olive oil without vegetables, I think in similar diet groups, but the the one with olive oil actually lost more weight because they were encouraged to eat more vegetables because they were able to make
Mhm.
it more palatable with the oil. I'm probably not doing that study justice. I don't know if you know which study I'm talking about, but I've definitely uh heard about like studies that it's like the
Oh,
oil makes, eating those healthier, more, I guess, fiber rich, calorie sparse foods easier. So it overall leads to more weight loss.
so like Hooper et al. 2020 actually did like a bunch of different sensitivity analyses, and some of the original like fatty acid substitution trials that were looking at different types of like oils and replacing saturated fat or whatever. So like they were just using like run of the mill oils like corn oil, soybean oil, those types of things.
Yeah.
A lot of those trials actually had body weight as like a secondary endpoint. So Hooper
Mm.
actually aggregated all of that data, and there's like a borderline statistically significant decrease in weight with like the vegetable oil group, right? So, or with the
Right.
vegetable oil groups across all of the studies that reported weight as a secondary endpoint. So, I mean, like even in the large scale, like multi-year trials, we just don't really see that oil increases weight.
Mhm.
I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to mention that Gil actually linked recently. Unfortunately, I don't like that they kind of made you go into the individual studies for detail, but he did link a meta-analysis on like canola oil feeding trials that found similar, slightly statistically significant reduction in weight. And like even if you go and look at like only the trials that they like told people to incorporate oils ad libitum, which means like okay, you eat however much you want. Um, it was still the case that they saw either no significant increase or a significant decrease in weight. So again, that comes back to the like what we discussed earlier. It's like okay, if you're using it to like roast vegetables or like on a salad or something, it's becoming more palatable and you're more satiated, and it's also slowing gastric emptying. It's pulling multiple satiation levers and leaving you feeling full longer, then you're going to decrease your calorie intake.
Yeah, so hopefully what we talked about has been helpful to you burning flax.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
definitely.
yeah, also I
Um,
hope that your username isn't a reference to your bowel movements. Sorry.
Jeez.
mm. More about
God damn it,
fitness.
man.
Um, but yeah, I must say I've been like on YouTube seeing
Mhm.
vegan YouTubers be rather against oil consumption. Simnit Nutrition, Goji Man, Hench
Mhm.
Herbivore to say a few,
Yeah,
and
I'm
they
familiar.
they rather say that studies show that it's more like a change from the standard diet to a Mediterranean diet, which includes oil and is generally just healthy, which
Yeah.
they see as the reason why oil is being portrayed as healthy, but then they
Mhm.
argue on top of that that it's unhealthy, right? So
Yeah,
that
right.
is what made me think that oil is unhealthy
Mhm.
earlier, like let's say in the beginning when I became vegan first 2 years ago and more. Um,
Yeah, right.
but
That's it's funny because that really like I said at the beginning, so you probably missed it. That like parallels my experience.
mm,
Like starting out, I had like a period of time where I like would have vehemently argued like, oh no, there's like no, you shouldn't incorporate it at all. It's not healthy. But like the case is that like even when you make considerations for diet quality otherwise, like okay, these like what if they're just consuming more and their like diet's healthy overall? When you like appropriately match diets and you increase intake, it still shows benefits. And that's because, like I mentioned, like in the actual intervention trials, when you take oil and you replace it with other sources of fat that you would normally get in your diet, you see the largest reduction in like the predominant risk factor for cardiovascular disease. It's like really weird that Hench like makes this claim like, oh, vegan diet, including oils, will like keep your LDL elevated. That's like not the case at all because if you look at the replacement studies, if you take saturated fat and you replace it with either polyunsaturated or monounsaturated fat rich oils, or you replace it with either just regular carbohydrate or even whole carbohydrates, the oils reduce LDL to a greater extent. They produce a greater reduction because in the case of polyunsaturated fat, they actually increase the expression of the LDL receptors, and those receptors increase uptake, so then there's less in your plasma. Um, so it's just like,
wow.
and I mentioned it's funny because he mentions this random like, oh, there's this anecdote of this guy that was eating a junk food vegan diet, which is like, okay, a junk food diet, like, was he eating like only the saturated fat rich oils, like? And he like when he went whole food plant based, he decreased his LDL, and I was like, well, if we're gonna go like the anecdote level, like I was before I was even vegan, I was consuming a diet that was like it was predominantly plant based, but like I had plenty of olive oil and other oils, and my LDL was like just about as low as his. So
I will also
Mhm.
like point out that there have been multiple meta-analyses and meta-regression analyses looking at the relationship between different like seed oils or culinary oils and
mhm,
cardiovascular disease risk, and it's pretty much universally observed. There have been three major meta-regressions done on this subject so far, and it's like universally observed that the reductions in cardiovascular disease risk are like linear and proportional to the reductions in LDL. So I mean, like I think all roads kind of lead to LDL. I think like the fatty acids in the oils are doing a lot of the heavy lifting,
mhm,
and like I mean you can hand wave about polyphenols and fiber, but at the end of the day these oils produce some of the strongest effects from a dietary perspective in reducing cardiovascular disease risk, and these oils have even been put head to head against like whole foods.
right.
For example, we have Predimed looking at olive oil versus nuts and
Yeah,
finding
I mentioned that.
non-inferiority between the two.
Mhm.
So I
I
just
mentioned
don't
that,
know
and
where the inference comes from that these oils are bad for us. I mean, it seems to be
right.
largely rooted in mechanistic speculation and not a lot of outcome data.
Mhm. And the same is the case I mentioned. I think he's like a second author. I think this is why I was having trouble finding it, but like Lee et al. And then there's like two. There's one that looks at just saturated fat and then replacing with different types of nutrients or foods, and it finds that the polyunsaturated fats produced a larger risk reduction for cardiovascular disease than whole grains did. And the same thing in a separate analysis that looks at, oh, they compared specifically to dairy saturated fat instead. The same thing is seen. The polyunsaturated fat rich oils significantly reduce risk to a greater degree than whole grains do. So it's just like if Hench is like, okay, you need to avoid oils and like instead you eat unrefined carbohydrates, well, we're literally seeing in the outcome data that they reduce risk more than those foods. Like it's just not like what is your basis for this?
Mhm. Yeah, my perspective has definitely changed.
Yeah, I'm
Yay.
glad. Like I said, I had a very similar, and like that's why I wanted to like start out with that, and like because I'm like if people are there, like I'm sympathetic to that, and I know I have plenty of friends that are like were similar. They started that way, and now it's like
I
wow,
did.
like what were we think? Yeah, what were we thinking? Like
Yeah, I was
um,
there as well.
I took my
That makes
nutrition advice
that makes
completely.
like what
more.
3 for 4. I don't know about Nick.
Yeah.
Well, but Nick went keto way more than any of us ever did, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about keto and vegan keto. Like, do you believe,
Right.
Matt, is there like, um, if we could, I don't know if it's even possible right now or if there is
Right.
even data about that,
Mhm.
like compare keto and vegan keto, since obviously there's not going to be any animal fat in the
Right.
vegan keto group. Like,
There.
could we get some info there, or?
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't think there's any direct comparisons between the two. But there are a few trials that aimed to do like a kind of like whole foods, like plant-based version of a ketogenic diet, like very high fat diet, and they have some incredibly impressive improvements in blood markers that are related to cardiovascular disease risk and diabetes and whatnot. There's like a one researcher that kind of did a like he calls it like the Eco Atkins diet, and it's like it's basically like a more environmentally friendly supposed to be version of a ketogenic diet that's like more plant based, and it's heavily rooted in like it's like tofu and like polyunsaturated fat and monounsaturated fat rich oils and just higher fat plant-based foods, and like see super impressive results there, and like that's even with the people not like adhering super well, like their adherence was okay, but even with an okay adherence they saw these like really solid improvements in risk markers. And this also goes to show, I'm actually just thought of this offhand, was I mentioned earlier in the discussion um, someone on Twitter, her name is Anna Borek, or like handles Skeptical Doctor, but she did her own experiment because she's like curious. She's like, okay, let's see what happens if I go on like a plant-based ketogenic diet, and that's what she did. She focused on like tofu and like polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat rich oils, and just like like some green vegetables here, and like she got her freaking LDL to like plummet. It was like rock bottom, and it's just like it's so funny seeing Hench at the beginning, like, oh, vegan diet including oils is just like you're not gonna decrease LDL. It's like, what are you talking about?
Almost like we need a balanced diet.
Yeah.
Seems like.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
guess
There's
this is a yeah, I and to the degree that you're placing vegan keto is certainly possible, and
Mhm.
I think to the degree that you get your saturated fat intake down under below the threshold effect level, and replace that with like polyunsaturated fatty acids and monounsaturated fatty acids, you're going to just watch your your lipid profile just like bloom. It'll like become this beautiful flower, transform from a desolate wasteland. But it's probably not that drastic. But yeah, vegan keto is certainly possible, and like
Mhm.
I don't do it just because I like having carbs, but like many people find that they do good on it, and it's like if you're getting the majority of calories from PUFAs and MUFAs, then you should be fine.
Yeah. You got it.
Okay. Are we able to
Oh no.
address all of your concerns?
Yeah.
Nice. Like if you, I don't know if you maybe you're on the Nicole's Discord. Um, if you have any questions, you can ask me.
Yeah, I was also gonna
I would
link
love to.
Nick's server, since you guys are in there, and I think
Yeah.
his.
Nick's server. If you have any nutrition questions, like there's always plenty of people there willing to answer questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would love to, since I am willing to study that in the future, but
Yeah,
not right
you're
now in
the
my life, unfortunate.
yeah you're the best kind of person that we like to see in the server, who's actually like curious and willing to listen. Um,
Isn't that kind of the point?
yeah, exactly.
Viewpoints. um, I did have one more thing I wanted to ask, but I don't think if it's like completely on topic.
Mhm.
And maybe you addressed it, then just cut me off if it was already said.
Yeah, go
It's
ahead.
the fat you eat is the fat you wear. You know that statement? Was that
It's
mentioned already?
yeah,
That
I just heard
discussed?
somebody laughing.
Yes.
Yeah,
I believe
it's
there's much more nuance to that than just this blatant statement. Is that
yeah, it's funny because like I know the study that they're citing when people are citing when they say that, and like if you actually go and look at it, like the end of the trial, like it's like overfeeding carbohydrate versus overfeeding fat. And at the end of the trial, the weight gain ends up being similar. It's based on the calorie surplus. So there's not like any unique mechanism that's like directly depositing this fat just because you're eating fat. Um,
so? In addition to that, I would just like to say one of my two raw vegan friends, the other one this time, um, says that if someone would be only eating fruits, he
right.
would not gain any weight since there is no fat in that diet. Even
Well,
if that person would overeat completely.
if they were overeating, they would still gain weight. If you're in an energy surplus, you're going to gain weight. You're not going to break the laws of thermodynamics. But the thing
Mm,
is, with that kind of diet, it would be so freaking hard because it's
oh
so
yeah,
much food
definitely.
volume. And
But if it was
Yeah.
like someone would go through that, that would
yeah,
mean from the sugar, right? That would be the
right,
main cause of weight
Yeah.
gain.
right.
That
Yeah.
friend then, when I pointed out to him, he said, "Well, your body has the mechanism in the intestines to build a wall so that the sugar just goes through you." What where does it come from? What is that claim? Like he has no studies or anything to show me that, but he says like at a point, the
Yeah,
calories you consume from fruits just stop and you don't take them. Right?
I have no clue what that mention is. If he's talking about like malabsorption, it's funny because like you could say the same. Like if you just like dump so much fat in your system, like you won't absorb it all because your body literally just can't handle it. Like you're like breaking the rate at which you can synthesize enzymes and proteins that are involved in digestion and absorption. It's like this. That's not a
Mhm.
good thing, though. That's terrible. Um,
Mhm.
I don't really know
I
where
mean,
that
yet
comes
they
from.
are raw vegan diet like people. They still have like the lowest BMI across vegans, right? As far as I
Right.
know.
Yeah, there
And
and it's you know what? Like it's to a fault because there's actually like the only research that we have on like a larger group of longer term um raw vegans is like it shows that especially for women it's a huge problem because they start getting amenorrheic. They don't have their periods because they're eating so few
Hmm.
calories and they're so underweight. Um, and they're getting so little iron in a raw diet um, that they start
Wouldn't
running
you
into
like
problems.
supplement that with juices? Like, they
You could
also oftentimes like
you could
drink
add
the juice.
iron in some way that could prevent that, but I think it's more of the calorie effect is that they're so underweight, they're so low weight that they're just stopping their normal processes, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah. One thing I want to, and this is a topic a whole on its own, so I'll just touch on it lightly. But I find that now the science here isn't super strong, so it's a little bit anecdotal, but there is some cross-sexual studies on this. But
Mhm.
generally, from what I've observed, there's with the call to avoid a lot of processed foods, a lot of like oils and sugars well, you kind of get a lot of people that slip into eating disorder territory. You could definitely see this in the raw vegan movement where It's you see it in the ex-vegan apocalypse. You could see clearly that a lot of these people that have gone ex-vegan after doing their, after flip-flopping on diets, they have undiagnosed eating disorders, like,
Right.
or okay, I won't make the diagnosis. I'm not a professional, but it's
Mhm.
they show some what in my opinion are very clear telltale signs of eating disorders. Both orthorexia, which is a focus on healthy eating, and
Mhm.
anorexia, which is a focus on low weight. So I find orthorexia is a bit more common, but I digress. Um, at least in the raw vegan community, and so I think having the like you can have a preference to not eat oil in the majority of times. Maybe you don't like it, maybe, or I don't know. For whatever reason you found it easiest to keep the weight down in, after trying oil and oil, you just find it easiest to keep the weight down in by not having oil. But I think that if you hold the opinion that, oil in any circumstance is going to be really bad for you, even if you have restaurant food, if you're staunchly against, having oil in restaurant food and you want to go to restaurants and you're denying yourself of social opportunities because of, processed food and whatnot. Obviously you can go overboard with, with restaurant food and all that. But I think that avoiding it as a law is it it just can lead to really nasty scenarios with eating disorders, and they're horrible. I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. So
Mhm.
I that's part of the reason why I think debunking some of the claims about oil, it helps turn it from a sort of less of a health motivation to realizing, it's maybe sort of your preference, but
Right.
yeah, at least giving some nuance so that you don't feel, this guilt whenever you go and have, oil and, for extended periods of time. Even maybe you don't have to feel that guilt that can contribute to what your idea of healthy eating is, and then, possibly contribute to your orthorexia. And so I actually have entire podcast talking about eating disorders and veganism with Nick here. I'll
Yeah.
drop a link in the comments. You guys should go listen to that. I cover some of the trials we talk about there, but we don't talk about oil specifically, but we do talk about health versus ethical motivations and what it seems to point towards, and determining whether ethical veganism can lead to eating disorders or not. So yeah, that's my plug. Anyways,
That is a big valid point.
Yeah, and I personally know a couple people that actually have had experience. It's like if I omit those foods, it's just like consuming a diet that's enough to maintain my weight is like damn near impossible for them. Um,
oh, dude, I know a staggering amount of people. I didn't think there were this many. Like even just in my personal context. I'm not even talking about like, YouTube context. I know a
mhm.
staggering amount of people like, oh, they just casually mention, oh yeah, I like looked up to freely and then I got an eating disorder. I'm like,
That was
it's like so
me.
casual. I'm like, what?
Oh no.
I fucking followed Freely's advice, and then like the demonization of things like oil and salt and like added sugars and stuff like that, just fucking like, oh my god, it set me off into like this downward spiral. It was awful.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to name names, but I was gonna say this person could be sitting with us right now. Yeah. But so yeah, I that's one point. And again, it's not, this is oil specifically and they're linked to like an eating disorder. That's not like something that hyper specific something that hyper specific hasn't been quite studied.
Mhm.
But I think that or eating disorders as a whole has been, studied, and especially the, it, it it just helps to debunk, health claims about oil that, it's bad and whatnot, because I think that, once don't see it as unhealthy, that leads to less restrictive diets, and then they are less likely to develop an eating disorder. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
I'm out of questions, definitely.
Good. No, I'm
That's
glad.
okay.
I'm glad you had them.
Also, just to
Pleasure to
mention
answer.
again, I updated the description with a link to Nick's server, so if like when the stream ends and you guys like, ah, rats, I missed the Q&A, you can hop into that server and there's lots of people there who can answer your questions and help you out and stuff.
Yeah, we're all pretty around often.
Yeah.
We're provided provided we have free time, we're happy to jump on a voice call, voice and chat about this because I figure you deserve to hear the truth over voice.
Mhm.
It's easier. It's way
Beautiful.
easier.
Yeah, it's
than
also easier. I was gonna
arguing.
Way easier. That's why I'll probably have to pin a comment stipulating that if anyone wants to argue, I don't think any of us are going to argue in YouTube comments. You can join the Discord server for that. But yeah. It doesn't look like
Is
anyone
the-
else. Oh yeah, sorry.
In the video description? In the
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it?
Oh,
okay.
Oh, I see it. Okay, yeah. Join. Oh, that's your Discord probably.
I might have to refresh it because it doesn't update.
Oh, I
Right.
see it. I see it.
Become
It's
a
in there.
link.
It's the link. Just the hyperlink isn't active yet.
Yeah, it's not a hyperlink.
Oh, it's not. Hold
You
on,
can
I'll
just
fix that.
copy it though.
But I joined. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
good. Good.
Star argues in YouTube comments. Nicole, you have to ban her right now.
Sorry, I can do that. But the
Okay.
hyperlink's not working.
Acquire brain damage. Oh, that's
Great.
true.
Blunt trauma in the YouTube comments.
It's terrible.
Why isn't the hyperlink working? That's weird.
Okay, I'm gonna close that.
Oh wait, because
Technical challenges continue.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another person. Bird's Nest. I like your name, by the way. Bird's Nest SSBM.
Sure. Okay, now the hyperlink's working. All right, Burning Flex, thanks for stopping by. I'm glad we were able to answer your questions and help you out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Most importantly, I hope you've understood our point so that it becomes easier to understand, like, kind of on your own, where the logic behind it. Rather, the one thing we don't want you to do is just assume what we say is true. We try to be rigorous with our argumentation so that people can understand it as their own and kind of be able to pick out bad points about oil or just whatever by yourself.
Yep, I'm gonna move the other person in here now, but thanks for stopping by, Burning Flex. Always appreciate the opportunity to clear things up.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, now I'm hot.
Hello,
sweatshirt needs to
Bird's
come
Nest.
Oh, hey. So I guess my question is like kind of related to, I have like a bit of a two-part question. So, like I talk to a lot of people a lot of the time about veganism, and lately I hear a lot of people bring up they'll mention like anorexia or eating disorders, and also they'll mention like, oh, well, there's a lot of people that have conditions where they can't be vegan. So, as far as I'm aware, there's not like any widespread conditions that are like that make anybody not able to be vegan.
Right.
Is that like true, or like how should I respond to that? Because I hear that a lot lately, and I don't want to have like a misinformed position,
Yeah, there's
Right.
it's
Go ahead.
difficult because like we can't like obviously sit here and be like, I know every medical condition, every person in this world, and like it's not possible. But like as far as I know, on a wide scale sort of thing, like I don't know of any condition that would prevent it. There are things obviously that would make it harder, but the thing is that the things that would make it harder would make any diet harder. They would just make people's life more difficult. Like they have severe like gastrointestinal issues, or they like have a resected gut or something. Like they can't eat certain foods. They like might have to use like liquid foods, some sort of formula or something like that. But like I said, that's gonna be a problem for them regardless of what diet they're on, and they're gonna have to be very attentive to what they eat and what they need to eat to not run into issues.
Yeah. So like what would be my response to somebody that says, "Oh, there's a lot of people that have eating disorders, so veganism isn't practical," or something like that? I know that's not really nutrition related, but I imagine that you probably have heard that argument before.
Useful to just like offer help. Like if someone's like their concern with going vegan is their eating disorder, it might just be the best way to approach that would be to like help them. Like, well, is there anything in particular that you're having difficulty giving up, or they would like help substituting, and just maybe approach it that way. Because I've often found that when people offer these sorts of things, it's like, oh, cost, whatever, is why I can't go vegan. Just offering help, directing them towards vegans who've suffered from similar things or who are also living in poverty, who could, provide firsthand experience and consequently more informed, advice, I think is a good route to take.
Yeah, that's true. Like when you're talking about veganism, it's so hard. It's so easy to get caught up in like, I have to win. I have to assert that my position is better than theirs, and they're the problem or whatever. But
Yeah.
they're just a byproduct of their environment, and it's yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
sure, no problem. Also, I don't see Vegan Mooncat in here anymore. I know I think he said he wanted to stick around and hold his questions until the end, but I don't see him in here anymore. But if he's in the comments under this after it gets published, I could just direct him towards Nick's server.
Was that were they asking? I think they were just mentioning the point about calories. Or am I misremembering?
Yeah, it was like caloric density, therefore like weight gain or something.
Yeah, maybe after I covered it, they decided that it was good.
A little bit of background on the vegan moon cat. Apparently, I didn't actually watch the video, but he did a video on Mike's channel, Mike the Vegan, talking about how getting a what is it getting on a whole foods plant-based diet helped with a lot of their health conditions like weight management, blah 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 blah. So I think it'll be of it. If you're listening, one thing I want to say is that again, if you're having success and you're meeting all your fatty acid requirements and all your nutrient requirements, eating the way you do, and you're still otherwise healthy and not like sleeping into what could be considered orthorexia, blah 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 blah, then by all means you should probably continue it because again, we talk about all these things, but diet adherence, is really the main factor that determines whether someone is successful or not on their diet. So, but what we're talking about is, prescribing to other people the notion that oil is unhealthy, right? So, it's less about you, like whether you're willing to experiment, in your diet with oil or not. You could it probably wouldn't hurt, but like I would, yeah, but we're talking about like how you talk to other people, how you say, okay, eating oil just isn't my preference, but I don't see why it wouldn't, why you couldn't eat it and have a healthy diet, blah blah blah. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, that's basically what I said, like when we covered it at the end, and that's maybe the reason that someone just said they're in the UK. They probably passed out. They might have just heard that and been like, "Okay, that's
Yeah, he's
satisfactory."
in the UK.
So I was like,
but drop by
I
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I just acknowledge the fact that like like if there's a person that like you have low calorie needs or whatever other reason that like it helps that you limit or exclude it, like by all means, if your diet is otherwise good, then that's perfectly fine. But as Mock pointed out, that's like not a reason to prescribe things that are not true. And like I said, it's not a reason to go on all these mechanistic tangent hypotheses like, oh, it increases risk because of this, and then just ignore the outcome data because it's convenient for you.
Rat studies.
Yeah.
So Star says, I often end up trying to get people to at least agree to veganism in concept if they're in some kind of mental disorder zone about it. Yeah, I think that's a good way of approaching it, is like this idea of like well, do you at least agree that it would be better if like veganism were universalized than if it weren't? Because like my sort of thing about like disorders and things like that is it's oftentimes like a waste of energy trying to argue your point that it's still technically unethical, because like the more we advocate for veganism and the more the world adjusts to veganism, those people will sort of naturally start to be accounted for anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't eat like dog poop in our society, so like advocating like a diet devoid of like dog poop isn't going to compromise anyone's eating disorder, because that's not a part of like our diet. And much the same way that like if our society begins to adjust to veganism to the point where like consuming animal products isn't the norm and isn't something people do, then you know veganism isn't going to compromise their eating disorder. Yeah, I think coming from a place of empathy is a like 40-year-old vegan said, is a good way of addressing those things.
Yeah, I actually like on that note, as far as like discourse goes, that like makes me like want to plug, just because I like I'm familiar with his content, but like I listened to this and was like, this is just like incredible for discourse in the areas. Like Earthling Ed did a podcast with Simon Hill, and they went over this, and they went over, Simon like prodded him about like how do you go about your approach, and like how do you deal with the responses and everything like this, and just like the way like his systematic process to it, and like acknowledging like, oh yeah, I'll just ask people questions, I'll try to get them to like realize X, Y, and Z, and like as long as I do that, I'm happy. And like plenty of other concepts he touched on that are just like amazing. That's super good to listen to if you're like interested in having any sort of discussions around the topic.
I didn't know Simon Hill talked to Earthling Ed. That's cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
I didn't expect that, like, convergence of the two vegan worlds. That's neat.
Yeah. If you guys don't follow Earthling Ed or Simon Hill, like, what are you guys doing? You should go follow both of them. Yeah, they both have way better accents than both of us. A British accent and an Aussie accent, like, yeah.
Yeah, I actually don't watch a lot of Ed's content because I feel like it's just very introductory, basic vegan stuff, which is fine. We need that content because for most people that's new to them. But I think when you've been in the vegan sphere for long enough, it's like you can only hear Ed go, yeah, in the dairy industry, they impregnate mothers and take their babies away from them and then kill them. It's really bad. Like, you can only hear that so many times before the content starts to get repetitive and sort of unwatchable. So.
Yeah, I mean, there was one time I saw Ed go Unleashed where he was like, yeah, it's like where he was commenting on someone saying, oh yeah, we have to stand behind UK dairy farmers, and Ed's comment was, yeah, it's probably a good idea to stand behind UK dairy farmers, because if you stand in front of them, you might get a fist up your anus.
Yeah, I remember that. That was
I
funny.
remember that clip. Yeah, holy shit. Oh my god.
Savage Ed.
I know.
Yeah, it's funny.
Ed Unleashed, but also Simon Hill, I just would really recommend. He's got a lot of great information, you know, just, you know, regarding environment and regarding health, and he also, you know, also brings on, you know, guests to talk about, you know, ethics as well. Like, so he's got a great perspective on pretty much everything. I don't recall him having any terrible takes, and he seems like the kind of person who would be willing to alter his world views and views on nutrition and anything in the face of new data, which is what we want.
Yeah, I've actually seen him do that, because somebody like, it's funny, somebody sent me like an old picture of his or something, and it was about oils, and I think he made some like interesting claim about like cold pressed versus non-cold pressed oils or something, and like the way he like quote ranked them, I was like, this doesn't make sense. And he was like, yeah, he's like, he went back and he just deleted the post. Like, he just straight up got rid of it.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Mike's video where he like ranks oils based on like.
Oh God, no. Yeah, he wouldn't. He will not back down on that shit.
Brutal.
Maybe we could cover one of Mike's videos next. Just go after everyone's favorite vegans while we're at it. We've already gone after it. Just keep doing it. All right. I don't think anyone else is going to join the Q&A, so we could probably close this up unless anyone else has something they'd like to talk about.
Nick, you didn't get to talk for very long. Maybe you want to plug. Maybe you want to plug your server as
Oh.
a center of cesspoolery. I'm just
I
kidding.
was gonna say, like, I totally forgot how the hell I forgot to mention this, but like, if anybody is like actually interested in like a comprehensive review of like the like almost, I don't know, maybe the vegan people make kind of like tangential claims, but like a review of all the like objections to oils and seed oils. There's the worst thing ever. Nick has like an incredible article on it. It's like a novel.
Yeah.
That's worth checking out.
It reads like butter.
The only issue with it is that I'm primarily addressing the claims that are typically made by low carb people.
Yeah.
I've noticed that the anti-oil claims seem to be somewhat different from vegans. Like when they're coming from vegans, they seem to be somewhat different. Like they're usually arguments about like, oh, flow mediated dilation. So like they choose different endpoints so that they can
Yeah.
capture olive oil basically. So like they can like say that olive oil is bad. So they got to turn to things like flow mediated dilation because olive oil is low in PUFA, so you can't play the PUFA card. Their arguments are altogether kind of different, and I didn't actually include too many rebuttals to many vegan talking points about oils. Which is kind of unfortunate. I'll do that for the final draft of the entire document. What I have published on my site is only about 50% of what I have written, and it's 15,000 words on my site. It's over 30,000 words, like the entire document. It's massive, like over 300 references. I think it's a tome.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the link, but not. So I could plug it in the... Yeah, it's at the article.
See if I can find it.
Well, if someone can join join Nick's server and demands the article if they want to. All right, was there anything else you guys wanted to cover?
I think we got everything.
Right. All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. This will be made publicly available, so if you're just tuning in at the last minute, no worries. Of course, thank you to everyone who came on here. Thank you a lot to Matt, who took the time to compose that document, going over the claims, and of course, Mock and Nick for setting aside time to come in here and help with the Q&A portion. Nick's... Oh, you
I
linked
think
this
Nick's
article.
most important contribution was on the thumbnail.
Oh my god.
I thought it was the chat commentary.
So I think this can be like a little exclusive detail for people who have stuck to the end of the stream. If you look closely on the thumbnail, Nick appears twice. See if you guys can find the 2 times. Like one's pretty clear, but let's see if you can find the second time that he appears.
Yeah. It'll
A
be
little Easter egg. All right.
Happy hunting.
Yeah. Vegan Easter egg, of course. Alright, so thank you guys for watching. I'll close the stream out now. But like I said, it'll be publicly available. So